The City Council meeting for the City of Issaquah is called to order at 7 p.m. today, September the 3rd, 2013. And the Council and I invite those who are present to join us in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag if you wish. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next on the agenda this evening for this council meeting is an opportunity for members of the public to speak to topics that are not scheduled for a public hearing this evening. And there are two items for public hearings this evening, and I will say what they are so that in the event you wish to speak to them, you'll speak to them at the appropriate time. And the items that are scheduled for public hearings this evening are Agenda Bill 6688, an ordinance establishing pre-annexation zoning for the Klahanie Potential Annexation Area. So that's pre-annexation zoning, and that's the sole topic of that hearing. The second one is Agenda Bill 6692, calling for a moratorium for Initiative 502 recreational marijuana facilities. So that is that particular topic. If you are here to speak to other items concerning Klahanie or other items concerning marijuana, for instance, medical marijuana issues, you would want to speak to those during audience comments. And I want to make that very clear at the beginning so that people are not surprised, think that they will have an opportunity to speak during the public hearing, and then be told that, no, they missed the chance to speak. So hope that that's clear to everybody as which topics are which. In addition to the ones that I have mentioned, it is always appropriate during audience comments to bring any item of concern or interest to the City Council's attention. So if there is something that's not on the agenda this evening, but that you feel is important and you wish to tell the Council about, this is the right time to do that during audience comments. Having made those remarks, the guidelines for public participation in audience comments are, we ask that when you are recognized, that you come up and use the lectern and the microphone so that you may be seen and heard by those people who are present in the council chambers and also those people who are viewing this on Channel 21, our government access channel. We ask that you state your name, your address, and if you wish, your relationship to the city, that you are a resident, a property owner, a business owner, whatever it is that you feel is important for us to know. And then we further ask that you limit your comments to 5 minutes or fewer. The comments are timed, and our clerk will be watching the clock and will give you notice of when you have about a minute left and so on. If you have written comments that you want to submit, please submit them for the city clerk so that we would be able to respond to them in writing. So with that, I will ask if anyone has signed up to speak during audience comments.
Yes, we have a number of comments, and it will begin with June Allison, who will be followed by Chase Chang.
Thank you. I'm here on behalf of the Issaquah Philharmonic, your own orchestra. I live at 4459 191st Place Southeast in Issaquah. I am a resident of Issaquah. Okay. The Issaquah Philharmonic is an all-volunteer community orchestra offering qualified musicians the opportunity to play symphonic music in free public concerts, 3 of them a year. Our objective is to foster music education for youth and adults and to enhance the performing arts community of Issaquah. Though our roots go back to a small music reading group organized in 1995 at Providence Point by Joyce Cunningham and conducted by Dr. Dwayne Bowen, we have grown both in size and repertoire over the years. In the past, we've been funded by member and audience donations and small grants from the Issaquah Arts Commission, and we thank the Issaquah Arts Commission for that. We still rehearse at Providence Point, but we have now come close to outgrowing that space. We are currently seeking an appropriate rehearsal and performance venue within Issaquah city limits. We rehearse and perform on Monday nights. We are licensed and incorporated in the state of Washington, the city of Issaquah, and we are listed with the federal government as a 501c3 nonprofit organization. In other words, we are a new group drawing on the strengths of the past, but moving in new and exciting ways with our recently appointed conductor, Chase Chang.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing us to present the Issaquah Philharmonic Orchestra. My name is Chase Chang. I live in Renton. I am the conductor for the Issaquah Philharmonic Orchestra. I have been a music educator in the public schools for about 14 years. The Issaquah Philharmonic was founded by members who have a deep-rooted love for music and the desire to share their music. It is the love of music that drives its members. We have been in operation as a 501c3 nonprofit for about 1 year. Our entire membership is composed of volunteers, including myself. We will soon have a website on www.issaquahphil.com. That's P-H-I-L. I'd like to share my vision of the orchestra. At the rate of growth, new ideas, and excitement that I experienced at meetings and at rehearsals, I see us being a model for surrounding communities and music ensembles. We're different from others because we foster an educational aspect to the orchestra rehearsal. Musicians are not just told what to do, but shown how it may be achieved. We are a community classroom. We are unique in that many of our decisions are made through frequent member feedback. We are not here to take what musicians we need, but to do our best to accommodate all experienced musicians, young and older. Music is what makes us human. Music defines cultures and affects the human soul. We want to add an energetic element of the performing arts to the city. Issaquah residents will have more opportunities to see or participate in a full symphony orchestra in the city. I see significant strides in 5 years. We will be visible among communities outside of the city. It is our desire to show that this beautiful city also produces beautiful music. I found that the Issaquah Philharmonic is a microcosm of the city of Issaquah. The people are friendly, always willing to lend a hand, respect one another, and produces great leadership. We hope to be a positive and vibrant representation of a city that is deep in tradition, history, and character. We hope that the city of Issaquah will join us in the healthy growth of our community orchestra, the Issaquah Philharmonic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next will be Timothy Lee, who will be followed by Terry Gustafson.
My name is Timothy Lee. I'm a resident of Issaquah. I live at 4113 185th Place Southeast. I am a partner in the ownership group, my brothers and sisters, that own Lakeside Industries. That's the gravel pit just on the north side of I-90. I just wanted to state that we support the proposed TDR ordinance. Our development agreement with the city includes 1,200 ERUs, which includes 500 of those ERUs are from TDRs. I know you all have been working very hard to make the TDR ordinance easier to use since we we contracted with you. I think it was in December last year, so it's been 9 months. You've been working hard at it. I think the new ordinance will help the city achieve its goals of putting density where it makes sense and protecting those critical areas that you want to protect. And we also support the city TDR bank and the authority for the bank to pre-sell those TDRs if the market for TDRs cannot respond to the need in the community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Terry Gustafson, who will be followed by Dick LaRoe.
Thank you. Terry Gustafson. I'm a board member with the Issaquah Phil, and we were slightly out of order due to my sign-up. But I'm just going to add a 30-second addendum here. We're just, because we're so new, getting our face out on media, social media. So before we get our website of issaquahphil.org, we look for us on Facebook and under Issaquah Philharmonic Orchestra. We thank you, Council, for your time and interest in us, and we look forward to ways that we can work together and how we might help you as you look to increase the arts in Issaquah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, and Dick LaRoe, and sorry if I pronounced that incorrectly, who will be followed by Paula Frederick.
I appreciate that very much. Good evening, Madam Mayor, City Council members. My name is Dick LaRue. I live at 4652 238th Way Southeast in Issaquah, and I'm the president of the Brookshire Estates Homeowners Association and a very strong supporter of annexation of our Klahanie PAA to the city of Issaquah. First thing I would like to do is to thank the council so much for offering us the opportunity to vote on annexation to the city. I thank each of the members of the council for their comments, both positive and negative, and we appreciate those. I'd like to mention that I think we followed the right procedure. You have followed the right procedure. The Nesbitt study is finished. The advisory group of citizens reviewed the study, and I believe the overwhelming conclusion of the study is that annexation of the PAA is good for the city of Issaquah and is good for the citizens of the Klahanie PAA. And I'm hoping that as the voting process finds its way out, that's what happens. Related to our hopefully becoming part of the city of Issaquah, I'd like to mention something I don't think has been mentioned before. It's not very quantifiable, but I think it's still worth considering. Most of the areas included in the proposed annexation area have, over the last quarter of a century, conducted a certain amount of self-governance through their homeowners associations. And I know you can't put a dollar figure on that, but I think it means something in that we've been used to kind of keeping ourselves in line, if you will, through the homeowners associations over all those years. And when it comes time for the city to enter into deliberations as to the value of having this group become part of the city, I hope and wish you'd think of that. One other thing. I've heard of late a concern that says, why should the PAA assume the past debt of the city of Issaquah? I find that to be an awkward argument, in fact, maybe even specious. And I would offer you this. When did you last move to a new city somewhere and come into that city and say, by the way, I don't want to pay all of your taxes. I only want to pay for the taxes that are related to issues and items and services that I have agreed with. I submit to you that's a specious discussion and argument, and it's not legitimate. That when we buy into the city, we buy in lock, stock, and barrel. We want to be part of you, and part of you in every way you have been and will be. With that, I want to say thank you very much for listening, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next will be Paula Frederick, who will be followed by Matthew Bott.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Paula Frederick, and thank you for inviting us. I'm representing Friends of Youth, which is a 61-year-old social service agency in the greater East Side area. The address here in Issaquah that we provide services for is 414 North Front Street. I'm a Kirkland resident. I wanted to take just a moment. I was asked to come to speak, and first of all, thank you all for your ongoing support of Friends of Youth and the services we provide. We obtain and receive a generous grant from you each year to provide a variety of services that I wanted to just review with you, and thank you again for your help and support. Friends of Youth has been in this community for over 25 years in the same office at Front Street, providing a variety of programs for youth and family services. That includes parenting support for parents of young children, elementary and middle school, as well as parent support and education classes for parents of high school students. We also have a Healthy Start program. It's a home-based program for young parents ages up to 22 years old with their first child. We, in addition, have substance abuse treatment, intervention, and assessment services. These are all outpatient services for teens ages 11 to 21 years old and their families. We do a lot of family counseling with the teens. We also have an outpatient mental health counseling service for children, actually from infancy all the way to ages 24 and their families, and do a variety of counseling interventions, assessments, and ongoing therapy and counseling for them based on their need and issues at hand. We, in addition, do prevention services in the schools, variety of different evidence-based practices based on the need and the interest of the school and the children there. In addition, we provide some services in our outreach program and our homeless services. Although they are mostly in Redmond and Kirkland, we do have outreach vans that come out to your area and help support any youth that need case management or any kind of housing services. And we have a new program that's called Safe Place. The library is part of that process, as well as our offices, where a youth can see a triangular green and white sign that says Safe Place, and they know they can go in and ask for help. And we are part of that process as well. So your dollars are stretched and used to a variety of different services that we provide. As a nonprofit, we are here for everyone and don't turn anyone away. So this money that you provide us and the grants you give us are very helpful in being able to serve everyone that we see. Thank you so much.
Next will be Matthew Bott, who's followed by Karen Lawler.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. My name is Matthew Bott. I serve as the CEO of the Issaquah Chamber. I work at 155 Northwest Gilman. And tonight I'm here to thank the council and the city for your continued collaboration on our joint tourism development initiatives. And I'd like to take a few minutes to update you on those initiatives going forward. But before I do that, let me remind the council and those here today about why the Chamber is so focused on tourism development. One, we view it as really low-hanging fruit for our community, an opportunity to bring in more visitors, to spend money in our community, to explore and discover our great treasures. It was recognized as a top priority of the Council, of the Economic Vitality Commission, and of the Chamber Board. If you look around the region, it's an area that more and more cities of our size and similar are working towards. There's lots of work going on in Kirkland, in Bellevue, and Snoqualmie Valley, so making sure we're competitive as those initiatives roll out. Tourism directly supports our businesses and our nonprofits. Village Theater, all the nonprofits that come to Salmon Days, over 70 of them. It directly supports the zoo, the hatchery, etc. So this is an area that's not only shared and benefit by businesses, hotels, restaurants, etc., Gilman Village, it's something that supports our local nonprofits. And our goal in the Chamber is really to see this effort launched, sustainable, so we can continue with our other initiatives, such as small business support, leadership development programs, and others. So let me give you 4 quick points on what's going on in that world and some things that we'll talk about and bring forward to you later in this, in this fall. The Tourism Committee was developed after Outside Seattle was discontinued. The Chamber and the City, if you look back 2-3 years ago, felt it was important for Issaquah's amenities and hotels, restaurants to come together before we work with another community and make sure that our ducks are in a row locally so we can collaborate and work together versus compete for broader tourism strategies and initiatives. So different than other communities, we found immediately that the collaboration between the amenities is extremely important. The left hand needs to know what the right hand's doing, so we could roll out 1 year-long promotional effort to bring people to town. There are other examples of communities who have put together very integrated marketing plans, which involve their hospital district and their library district and their school district, businesses, cities, that pool efforts together and bring tourists in all year long. So that collaboration, first and foremost, has been going on for the last 2 years. Out of that work and working with the city's economic development staff, it was identified that we should go forward with an RFQ to identify a firm or partnership to develop a business plan for this work. So that RFQ went out about 6 weeks ago. The deadline to get the proposals was last Monday, and we'll be coming forward to the LTAC committee with a firm and a request for funds to support the development of that business plan. That was something that's a city chamber collaboration we're excited about. In a few minutes, I'll pass around the white paper on the Issaquah Visitor Information Center, which is a partnership that the city and the chamber have been working on for the last 15 years. And I'd like to go through some of the upgrades that we've done to the center to support the visitors. There's been internet added. We've put up a flat screen TV where we can show Issaquah infomercials, if you will. We've underwritten a number of those infomercials already. We've put up more posters and framed photos of our amenities, such as the Village Theater and the Hatchery. We've redone the layout. We did a paint job on it. It looks great. So come on by and check it out, and we're excited for that work to come to fruition this year. And then a fourth piece I'll leave you with is a discussion.
1 minute remaining.
Thank you. Is a discussion about community branding and marketing, and that's something that we in the chamber are very excited that is being talked about for next year, hopefully. Hopefully there'll be some funding identified for things such as Welcome to Issaquah signage, enhanced branding and marketing to get the word out about our great businesses and our amenities. So in summary, we appreciate the collaboration, the leadership, the vision behind this one tool of economic vitality. There's many more to do, and we know those efforts are underway, but this is something that we're working hard at. So I want to thank everybody for your work there, and look forward to more discussions throughout the rest of this year and next. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Karen Lawler, who will be followed by Michelle Kemper.
Good evening. I am Karen Lawler, and I live in 1000 Cabin Creek Lane, right up the street here in Issaquah, and I'm happy to follow Matt. I am the Director of Marketing for Sept restaurant up in the Issaquah Highlands, and I'm just here to tell you to say that tourism matters. Those two simple words, tourism truly does matter. And I thank you all for being here and for listening and for your understanding of the importance that tourism will bring to our community. I have been part of the Issaquah, the tourism committee that Matt was talking about since its inception. And I have to say it's been a really cool experience. I get to meet some really neat people. But I also got my eyes opened to businesses and opportunities that, as a resident, I've been here for 25 years, I didn't even know existed here in Issaquah. There are so many hidden gems in our community, and as residents, we don't even know about them. And so it was very evident to me that we need to expose who we are and what we do and what we have to offer, residents and travelers alike. And it was also evident that the work that we've started with this tourism committee, I really do think we're off to a good start, and I think we have some great support around us. But I think it's just the tip of the iceberg, and I think we need to continue to create the reputation of a city that's alive and energetic and welcoming to everybody, either who comes here as a destination or who's just traveling through, because that happens a lot too. And obviously, how do we do this? We have to be aware who we are, what we have, so that we can shout about it, different levels of marketing that we can do, and of course, knowing our brand. Who are we as a city, and what do we want to say about ourselves? The old destination marketing term comes up. We hear about that a lot. But it is essential to growing and sustaining a healthy, attractive tourism campaign. We need to get people interested in our area. So let them know, yeah, Issaquah is on the map, and not only it's on the map, but where it is. Because as tourism increases, so do the opportunities for businesses to develop. And then thriving businesses, therefore, increase the quality of life for the community as a whole. And then regarding restaurants and how I fit into all of this, I think it's probably a no-brainer to say that the fortunes of restaurants truly are closely related to travel and tourism. And I say that because I think we all know it because we all lived it. So when you're traveling, you're making plans with your family or your friends, and you're wanting to go someplace, one of the first things you do is, oh, where do we go to eat? Where's the best place to go to eat? So we want to know where the restaurants are and the places that we're going to. Or if we're just driving through town, where should I stop to eat? So restaurants are a huge part to the travel industry. Our culinary travels, that's what we remember and what we share with other people. And Issaquah's role as a food and wine destination is core to these tourism efforts. And because food is a great way to experience an area, to feel what the area is all about. And it's true for both personal and business experiences. You can't forget about the business traveler. We see this all the time. It's like the businesses are counting on restaurants as venues to conduct business. It's like the restaurant space is becoming an extension of the office space. So we see this all the time at the restaurant, whether it's one-on-ones or businesses that are together that are using restaurants as their office space. So, I mean, it's pretty obvious that increased tourism benefits us as restaurants, but it also does a lot of good for the community as a whole. People come and they eat in your restaurant, well then maybe they're going to go and they're going to sleep in your hotels, and they're going to go and buy your retail goods. They're going to create jobs. And so it's kind of a win-win. We look at it as a win-win for everyone. Every dollar spent at restaurants generates revenue for the community at large. So, we just want to highlight the diversity of our community. We want to bring it home. We want to bring people home, share who we are and what we do, and make each authentic experience a memorable one, a fun one, and one that drives revenue, because it's a great little web that we're able to weave together. So direct visitor spending benefits not only our restaurants, but all of us. And once again, I say thank you. And I personally, as well as my restaurant, and I guess I can speak for all the restaurants in the area, we're really part of this this drive, and we want to see it succeed because we believe in the area that we live in, and we just want to share it with everybody. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so Michelle Kemper, followed by Nayla Cumming.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and City Council members. My name is Michelle Kemper. I'm a resident of Issaquah. I live at 585 Saddleback Loop Way, Northwest. My address is bigger than the street that I live on. And it doesn't fit on any mailing label. I am a longtime resident. I've been living a property owner in Issaquah for 13 years. However, our family has been coming to Issaquah on practically a daily basis for about 27 years. So I consider myself the consummate tourist, and am here representing just a citizen at large. I have been a member, however, for the last 2 years of the Tourism Committee. And when I communicated with Matt Bott, how could I possibly speak up on what our city is doing on tourism issues, he reminded me that this meeting was happening this evening. And like many residents, we can sit back and we can talk over a glass of wine or a cup of coffee and make personal comments on how we think our city should be operating. But I think it's also important to stand up and speak personally and express my personal gratitude and thanks for the work that is being done. The ship is pointed in the right direction as it regards to tourism, and I'm very pleased to have been a part of the Tourism Committee working with our City Council. I have spent the last 37 years as the Chief Compliance Officer with Safeco and Symetra Financial Services Companies, and I'm very pleased to say that 2 years ago I retired and took on full-time work as a volunteer. So I refuse to put on suits and pantyhose and high heels anymore. I'm now the jeans cadre here. And one of the top of the list of my activities is looking at how to keep Issaquah a vibrant community. And in my business experience, the one thing that was drummed into me was nothing happens until a dollar is spent. Our community doesn't grow. Our schools are not vibrant. Our housing market does not increase. Our city is in a state of decline until a dollar is spent. And one way to spend that dollar is through tourism. Now, Matt and Karen have already covered all the speaking points that I was planning to cover, so I won't repeat those. But I would like to say that our tourism plan, the proposal that Matt talked about, with the RFQ and the business plan is a vibrant one that will actually put together a working plan that we can get our hands around. We can nip and tuck on the sides in terms of some of the details, but overall the plan is pointed in the right direction. And as a homeowner and as a volunteer, I would like to see our city to be able to support this. I would just like to thank you for your allowing me this opportunity to speak up. My neighbors have all spoken to me saying, don't speak from the sidelines over a glass of wine, show up at the meeting and speak. So I get 2 points. I showed up and I've given my input. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And our last audience comment person listed is Neela Cumming.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. Can you hear me? Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you tonight, to thank you for your generous support of early intervention programs here in Issaquah. My name is Nella Cumming, and I'm the Director of Pediatric Therapy Programs at Encompass. Our main campus is in North Bend, but we also have an office in Blakely Hall, and our program is home-based, so we're in lots of different addresses here in Issaquah. Last year, Encompass Pediatric Therapy Program served 75 children and families in our Birth to 3 early intervention program who live in Issaquah. Early intervention serves infants and toddlers with developmental delays or disabilities in their home. We have a team of highly trained pediatric therapists who work with the parents and their children to meet their child's individualized goals. The children we serve may have all different levels of delay or disability. Could be a 2-year-old who is getting frustrated because he understands everything but he doesn't have any words to say what he wants to say, all the way to a child who's a 26-week-old preemie who's been in the NICU for the last 6 to 8 months and is on a feeding tube. We serve all those children. The best estimate we have is that about 3% of children who are born nationally or in this country, locally, this is a national estimate, is that 3% will qualify for early intervention services. The vast majority of those children don't receive the services because people don't know that they're available to them or don't know that they would qualify. Early intervention services can make a dramatic difference in a child's ability to succeed in school and in life. In preparation for my remarks today, I asked some of my therapy team who work with the children in Issaquah to tell me about their work. So first I'd like to tell you about Spencer. 1 year ago, Spencer rarely used words, and the family, who wanted to be able to go out into the community, was basically homebound because of his behavior. Being home was not pleasant because of Spencer's lengthy tantrums, his unwillingness to eat anything except for the most preferred food, his frustration that was growing for Spencer and his mother. When Spencer, who has significant sensory issues, became upset because of a loud noise or a touch that he didn't like or a visual distraction, he would scream and fuss. His mother didn't know what to do with these behaviors, and Spencer had no ability to verbalize his anxiety or requests. Today, with lots of support and education, the family goes out for meals, which I think Chamber of Commerce will be happy to hear. And he also eats new foods with only a little encouragement. This was given to me by a therapist, so I'm just reading what she gave me. Recently, he went on a successful family vacation with Spencer's extended family to the beach, including being on an airplane. And his mother is no longer fearful of going out with Spencer and his siblings. Spencer uses 3- and 4-word sentences to request and protest. And in fact, he did not qualify for speech and language therapy after he turned 3 years old and graduated from our program. Another child our physical therapist told me about was Sam. Sam came into our program at 14 months because he was not yet crawling or rolling or even really able to move very much. He also had torticollis, which is a condition where the head is to one side or the other. It's not straight up and down. And he wore a helmet 23 out of 24 hours a day to help shape his skull. He required substantial support for feeding. Over the course of several months, little Sam learned to roll, sit by himself, and play with toys, to crawl, and finally to walk and even run. He outgrew his need for his helmet, and his torticollis totally straightened out. That's a physical therapist term, I guess. We did need to push him quite a bit at the beginning, and he didn't like it very much. But once he got a taste of how great it felt to move around and explore his world,
1 minute
he motivated
remaining.
himself to walk. he no longer needs birth to 3 services. The City of Issaquah generously supports this work and has for many years. We could not offer the breadth and depth of early intervention services that we do offer without your vital support. We're very grateful to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any more?
Before I call upon people to speak during audience comments who have not had an opportunity to speak, for anyone who was not here at the very beginning of the meeting when audience comments were announced and the public hearing was announced, I'm going to repeat those remarks. The public hearings are on 2 very limited topics. The first one, Agenda Bill 6688, is an ordinance establishing pre-annexation zoning for the Klahanie Potential Annexation Area. The second one is Agenda Bill 6692, which is a moratorium for Initiative 502 recreational marijuana facilities. If someone who is here who wishes to speak on other matters related to either medical marijuana, Klahanie in general, but not those specific topics, this is the time and the opportunity to speak to those things. So having said that, I will ask if there is anyone present who has not yet had the opportunity to sign in who wishes to speak. Yes, sir.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to speak up. My name is Mark Seeley, and I live at 4145 243rd Lane Southeast in the Klahanie neighborhood. I would like to actually expand on the gentleman's comments from the Brookshire neighborhood and talk about this idea that we've had some aspects and freedom and enjoy the opportunity to kind of determine how we live in that area. In regards to the planned February vote for annexation, we are urging the city of Issaquah, and by we I mean I'm here also representing Klahanie Choice, a group recently formed. We are urging the city of Issaquah to allow Klahanie and the surrounding neighborhoods to have some levels of self-determination. And fortunately, there is a mechanism for allowing that to happen. We ask that the city of Issaquah place on the annexation ballot the option of establishing a community municipal corporation so that residents of Klahanie can address land use decisions made by the city. These corporations, often called community councils, have been successful in Kirkland and Bellevue. We would like Issaquah to show that they care about what's happening in Klahanie and add the option of a community council to give the 10,000 plus people some level of assurance that we can have some control and maintain some interest in our neighborhood specifically. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who has not had the opportunity to speak during audience comments? Anyone else who wishes to speak during audience comments? Third call, is there anyone else who wishes to speak during audience comments? Seeing and hearing no one else who wishes to speak during audience comments are closed. The next item on the agenda this evening are committee and regional reports by the council, and I will ask Councilmember Fortner to begin.
Thank you. Our Council Infrastructure Committee met last month on August 19th. We had a water system plan update. We also discussed major amendment to Issaquah Highlands two-party development agreement and the new development agreement for the Swedish hospital development. We reviewed a franchise agreement with Telecom of Washington, King County Conservation District grant application for Lower Lewis Creek restoration, Department of Ecology NPDES Phase 1-2 capacity grant acceptance, capital improvement program, and acceptance of a state grant. A number of these are on the consent agenda this evening. The next meeting is scheduled for September 19th. That is a change from our usual schedule at 5:30 in the Pickering Room at City Hall Northwest, and the agenda will be made public as soon as we get it put together. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Land and Shore Committee last met on August 13th. We had several items. We had an update on the Klahanie PAA, and of particular note from that update was that there is a public hearing scheduled before the Boundary Review Board, which will be at the Issaquah Holiday Inn on September 18th and 19th, and the meeting starts at 7 p.m. We also continued our discussions and updates on the Swedish Hospital Development Agreement. I think the indications were that the development agreement would be in front of the full council on October 7th. I believe that would be probably the mid-October meeting now. Also, we heard during that update that the development agreement term is now, the discussion is now having that extend to 2033 instead of 2027. Again, that's all still in process. We also discussed Agenda Bill 6693, Issaquah Highlands Vista Park Block 10A Preliminary Plat, which is on tonight's consent agenda. Also on tonight's consent agenda is Agenda Bill 6695, which is housekeeping amendments to the municipal code. And we also talked about Agenda Bill 6705 and Agenda Bill 6692 having to do with I-502, which is on the agenda tonight. We will have a continued discussion, or we continued our discussion, and we will also continue it at our next meeting, Agenda Bill 6668, which regards amending the land use and engineering fees. And then the last item we talked about was Agenda Bill 6686, adoption of the 2012 International Fire Code with amendments, and the committee recommend that that be on the consent agenda for September 16th. Land and Shore next meets on September 10th. We normally meet at 5, but we have some scheduling issues, and so we will be meeting at 5:30 here in City Council chambers. We'll get another update on Klahanie annexation. We will continue our discussion about the Swedish Development Agreement, and as I noted, also continuing our discussion of Agenda Bill 6668, land use and engineering fees. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Martz.
No report.
Councilmember Scher.
No report, thank you.
Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Services and Safety Committee will be meeting September 5th at 5 p.m. in the Eagle Room. There are 5 agenda bills coming before us that evening. The first is 6696, Domestic Violence Ordinance, and this is in regards to the commission of a domestic violence crime in the presence of children. The next 4 agenda bills are all from the Finance Department. The first being in regards to petty cash ordinance. The second is petty cash increase amount. The third is a financial policies. And the fourth is establishing a contingency fund. Again, that is February 5th at 5 p.m. in the Eagle Room. September, thank you. September 5th. If you need to review these agenda bills, you can find them on the city's website. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Winterstein.
No report.
Councilmember Butler.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The council will hold a work session here in council chambers on September the 9th, beginning at 6:30. There are 2 items on the agenda. The first, a transportation concurrency update, and the second, a discussion of regional committees and assignments, looking at vacancies projected for committees, regional committees beginning in 2014. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Under the mayor's report this evening, as soon as I find it, there will not be an executive session this evening. That's the first item. And then I asked the council to please note that the proposed ordinance to Agenda Bill 6695, Land Use Code Housekeeping Amendments to the Issaquah Municipal Code, has been edited to reflect the current exhibit labels. If the ordinance is adopted, it will be approved with the corrections, and you should have a copy of those corrections so you know what the labeling is. The next item, this month of September, is proclaimed to be Childhood Cancer Awareness Month in the city of Issaquah, and I am going to read that proclamation. I'll come over here to do that. Whereas 36 children in the United States will be diagnosed with cancer each day at an average age of 6 years old, 1 out of 5 children diagnosed with cancer will not survive that disease. And the types of cancers that affect children are most often very different from those that affect adults. And whereas childhood cancer spares no socioeconomic, ethnic, racial, or geographic class, pediatric cancer is the leading cause of death by disease in U.S. children under 15 years of age. The causes of most pediatric cancers are largely unknown. And whereas 2/3 of childhood cancer patients will develop long-lasting chronic conditions resulting from treatment, childhood cancer rates have been rising for the past few decades. Approximately 11,630 children in the U.S. under the age of 15 will be diagnosed in 2013. And whereas cancer kills more children than AIDS, asthma, cystic fibrosis, diabetes, and muscular dystrophy combined, and in the last 25 years only 2 drugs have been specifically developed for children's cancer, and whereas less than 5% of the federal government's total funding for cancer research is dedicated to childhood cancer, and only about 3% of funds raised for the National Cancer Institute go directly to pediatric cancer research. Funding for pediatric cancer research has gone down steadily since 2003. Despite these facts, and the fact that cancer research for children is consistently underfunded, and despite major advances in treatment, it is still critically important to conduct the research and increase awareness regarding pediatric cancer. Now, therefore, I, Ava Freisinger, Mayor of the City of Issaquah, do hereby proclaim September 2013 to be Childhood Cancer Awareness Month in our city, and I call upon citizens to join me in helping raise the awareness of pediatric cancer and its victims. In witness whereof, I have hereunto set my hand on the seal of the City of Issaquah this 3rd day of September 2013. I have the proclamation ready for someone. Thank you. Next on the mayor's report, we had a wonderful turnout last week at our grand opening celebration for Confluence Area Park. Located at 695 Rainier Boulevard North, it is composed of 3 contiguous parks totaling 15.5 acres, and it's at the confluence of Issaquah Creek's main stem and the East Fork, hence the name. Features include interconnecting trails, a meadow, play areas, a restroom facility, and as its centerpiece, a picnic structure designed to evoke the land's roots as the Anderson Farm. Next item on the mayor's report, with the new school year starting, please remember to drive safely around schools, and remember that the speed camera along 2nd Avenue Southeast will be reactivated tomorrow, September 4th, to increase safety and reduce speed violations near several Issaquah schools. The cameras operate only on school days from 7 a.m. through 4 p.m., and they monitor both directions of traffic. Thank you for helping to keep our children safe. This Friday, September 6th, is the last day of the year, of this particular year, to enjoy the Issaquah Art Walk. So be sure on Friday to head over to the Historic, Cultural, and Business District to see regional artists participate in creative activities, listen to live music, and enjoy the end of summer. And so that concludes the mayor's report. The next item is the consent calendar, and the first part of that is I will ask the council if payables and payroll have been reviewed.
Yes.
All right. And then I will ask the council's pleasure on the consent calendar. Councilmember Butler.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would move approval of the consent calendar as submitted.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. All those in favor of adoption of the consent calendar as submitted, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passed unanimously. The next item this evening are two public hearings, and as I have previously pointed out, one has to do with the establishment of pre-annexation zoning for the Klahanie Potential Annexation Area. The second one has to do with a moratorium for Initiative 502 recreational marijuana facilities. And before we open the public hearing, I will describe the procedure by which people speak during the public hearing. And that is very much like the procedure for speaking during audience comments. We ask that when you are recognized, you, for these, come over to the lectern and you use the microphone so you may be seen and heard by those who are in council chambers this evening and by those who are viewing the council meeting on Channel 21, our government access channel. We ask that you give us your address. If you wish to indicate a relationship to the city that you feel is important for us to know, that you are a resident, a property owner, a business owner, whatever it is that you wish to emphasize, you may do so at that time. We further ask that comments be limited to 5 minutes or fewer. And if you have written comments, please submit them to the city clerk. With that, Agenda Bill 6688, the ordinance establishing pre-annexation zoning for the Klahanie PAA, is coming back from the Land and Shore Committee to the council for action. And I will therefore ask Councilmember Goodman to introduce this and to and then we will call upon staff for a presentation, the staff presentation.
Well, this came as part of the package, I believe, the Klahanie, so we haven't looked at it the last couple of meetings, so I don't know that I have anything to add. It's probably better that staff make the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. So we will move to the staff presentation.
All of a sudden there's loud. Okay. Okay. Thank you all for being here tonight, and thank you for the great introduction on how narrowly focused this public hearing is tonight. I'll give you just a brief background before we take all your public comments tonight. The background for you all is, if you go into the way, way back machine, those of you that might have been around in 2005, I know there's a few of you that were here. There's some smiles of flashbacks. There was a vote on Klahanie, and 67 folks, residents in the Klahanie PAA area, did vote in favor of annexation to the city at that time. 47% voted to not accept the bonded indebtedness. And when that information came to the City Council in 2005, the City Council chose not to annex them. Having said that, some years went by. In May of 2012, the city received a petition from the Klahanie area with over 500 signatures saying that they would like to be considered for annexation again. council goal setting had that as a goal that same year, and we started our fiscal study. 2013, we had a task force that looked at the study as it was being done. We did a lot of outreach. This year, we finished the study. We had a lot of work with Land and Shore and the Council of a Whole, and made sure that all the questions were answered. And in July, we had a resolution of intent to annex, and we are now in the process of going to the Boundary Review Board. We've done everything that we can imagine for community outreach. We have frequently asked question page on the website. We've been outreach to community groups. We had a public meeting in Challenger Elementary that was very well attended, and a workshop here that was also well attended. We've been using social media and a lot of newspaper articles to get the word out to all the Klahanie area folks and the existing city residents. Under state law and under our city rules, we are allowed to establish pre-annexation zoning for the area before the election takes place. And that's really the reason we do it, is so that those that are voting know exactly what the city intends to do if it does actually become annexed, so there's no surprises, if you will. The city practice is to use comparable zoning to King County, so again, it's a consistent from what it is today in King County to what it would be in Issaquah is incomparable. Unless a property owner wants to approach us, as you might remember in Providence Point, there were some property owners that were already in a process with King County to do a development, and so they made a special agreement with the city to continue on with that development review process, so they wouldn't lose any of the attributes to the process that was going through at that time. We haven't had any of those requests at this time for this annexation. The comparable zoning is here on the screen. The only change since 2005, which is a little amusing that there are no changes in the zoning, is the very top one, the R1, 1 unit per acre, is a newly added one because there's a new area that was added by King County to our potential annexation area, and that's the East Ridge Christian Assembly that's on the south side of Issaquah Falls City Road. There's 3 and a portion parcels that were added after 2005 by King County, and then the city accepted them into the PAA, and that is what the additional zone is. The process for pre-annexation zoning is 2 public hearings. They have to be 30 days apart, so it allows all of you to ask your questions of the council, and you all get to decide which questions you feel you would like to know more about and what information you need before you can make a decision on the pre-annexation zoning. So for tonight, it's the second bullet is you don't take any formal action. You just let us know what you would like us to prepare for you in that pre-annexation ordinance that would come to you in October. This is a map of the Klahanie area. These 3 and a portion parcels are the new additions since 2005. All the other areas are zoned comparable to what they are in King County at this time, and they are also the same zoning as we proposed back in 2005. The red is the little community business on the Issaquah Falls City Road. To the north are the Klahanie Park that's owned and operated and maintained by King County. To the east are the 2 schools and 1 parcel. Just for some background. The next steps after tonight's public hearing is the October 7th is your second public hearing, where you get to choose or to take action or not on the proposed pre-annexation zoning. Again, it only will take effect if it's annexed. If they're not annexed, it goes away. There's nothing that happens. And once established, if, let's say, the community business center wants to come in and apply for an upzone or a rezone or some such thing, they can come in just like any other property in the city to ask to have their zoning changed. Are there any questions before?
Yes, Councilmember Martz.
One thing zoning-wise that I would have thought I would have seen on that map was something about Yellow Lake. Because the whole area of Yellow Lake, I think, is just shown as residential, right? Which doesn't seem to make
Right.
sense.
There are there are critical area tracts that exist today that are either open space forever or they have some kind of a covenant on them. Because they're zoned by King County to be residential, we didn't want to start carving them up and making them, you know, a native protection area or a, we could choose to do that, I suppose, once they came in. We have no plans to do that now because they're already protected. But that's something we could consider if and when they came in, just so that it's evident that they are protected areas now.
Thank you.
But yeah, all that empty, that looks like there's no plats, those are actually the lake and the protected areas. Good question.
Other questions from the council prior to the public hearing? All right. It is 8 o'clock and the public hearing is now opened. And I will ask if there is anyone who has signed up to speak during the public hearing.
There is not.
Is there anyone present who wishes to speak during the public hearing? Yes, ma'am.
So hello, my name is Kirsten O'Malley. I'm a property owner in the Klahanie area. And my address is 4145 243rd Lane Southeast. And I'm also representing Klahanie Choice. Klahanie Choice is a neighborhood citizens group, and we're dedicated to helping Klahanie and also the surrounding neighborhoods just to make the best choice for our future. So our group found that zoning issues are legally complex, and so we have engaged attorney Rick Aramburu to provide some legal guidance for us. So I'd like to hand to the council a letter written by Mr. Aramburu. So we do have a number of issues that we're concerned with. So the zoning report and the map were made available just this last week on, I think it was Thursday, and considering the Labor Day holiday weekend, the timing we feel really can't be considered adequate to review the contents of the zoning report. So we're just concerned that the council expects to approve zoning on October 7th, really before reviewing comments received at that hearing. Overall, we feel that if Klahanie can be expected to be treated in this way, we're just concerned with the timing and the contents. Issaquah, I believe, knew about the contents in July, but we're just getting the copies 2 business days before the hearing over Labor Day weekend. So on one of the slides that they showed here, the zoning proposed is actually much denser than the current King County zoning. So I feel that 20% more denser is significant, so it's not equal. And we really recommend that you modify that zoning to more closely match the King County zoning. So really, in particular, that means modifying from single-family small lot to single-family suburban. Another concern is that the date of Issaquah's final hearing is actually after the Boundary Review Board hearing. And the BRB has set its public hearing for September 18th, but you won't be deciding on the zoning until October 7th. So we will be urging the Boundary Review Board to reschedule that September 18th hearing until after the zoning is resolved. And we respectfully ask that you join us in that request. And those are my comments.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other comments? Any other comments for the public hearing on the pre-annexation zoning?
Good evening. David Kapler, 255 Southeast Andrews Street. In the early 1980s, we had the King County Newcastle plan brought in the concept of an urban village. And then the city of Issaquah followed with their Tibbetts East Cougar plan, which also adopted a formal urban village type of zoning. Previous to urban villages becoming something that were seriously looked at in King County and the region, there were planned communities, and that's what Klahanie was, which was more of a suburban village perhaps. And the question is that suburban village, that planned community, is getting quite old, and we'll be looking at a time when redevelopment of parts of that are certainly potentially there. Our own urban villages are likely quite a ways from that need for redevelopment, and by the time they're in that redevelopment stage, of course, the urban village agreements will have expired, and we will have to have good codes to deal with redevelopment. I think, look, this issue of the Klahanie zoning, especially in the area of Klahanie itself, not so much some of the others are more typical plats, needs to be looked at carefully to make sure that redevelopment can occur appropriately. You see some of the issues that have occurred in, the mega houses, the short platting of lots, and a lot of other things that are going on in the region, and we have to make sure that if we're going to be allowing any of that, that we are fully aware that we are doing it and the community is fully aware of doing it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else who wishes to speak to the pre-annexation zoning? Yes, sir.
My name's Tom Harmon, and I live at 4369 243rd Avenue Southeast in Klahanie. And I'd just like to say a few words about the zoning. To me, and I think to everybody in Klahanie, Klahanie is a very, very special place. And part of the reason it is a special place was the master plan development that Mr. Kapler just talked about. In fact, he took about half my speech. But definitely it was a 4-unit per acre zoning over 875 acres. But the thing about Klahanie is it had some very, very special environmental features. One of them already mentioned is Yellow Lake. Another one that's up in the Klahanie ball field area is Queen's Bog. You can go on Google and Google Queen's Bog and actually get a 16-page report. It is, to environmentalists, a world-class wetland, a fen. And in the early hearings in Klahanie, they talked about protecting Queen's Bog. And I see it zoned as community recreation. I don't think that, I realize the critical areas ordinance wouldn't let it become a ball field. But there's some very, very environmentally sensitive features that were accorded special protection in the Klahanie master plan. So as a result, it was clustering to allow the open space that does make Klahanie, the trail system and so forth, that makes it very, very special. Those open spaces were put in as permanent open space. They were not reserve tracts. In other parts of the Klahanie PAA, such as Brookshire, there are more traditional plats, of which the plats were platted to have reserve tracts. And the reserve tracts would attract whatever density would come later. And of course, it's my concern that the zoning is becoming more dense, not less dense. So you have people in Brookshire or Livingston or Hunter's Ridge and some of those, as they see some of their reserve tracts being developed or some redevelopment, that it certainly is a lot denser than what they were traditionally used to. The other thing, of course, is looking at King County, the single-family suburban is a lot more like King County. But also, take a look at the adjoining neighborhoods over in the city of Sammamish. And most of them are in R4 or R6 zoning. So you want to be comparable to the neighborhood. But what I would encourage the planning staff to get a hold of the Klahanie master plan. I believe the library has one in their archives. The University of Washington has one in their library, the King County Archives, and I think you can get it from Goldsmith Engineering. They were the Hugh Goldsmith and Associates that did the original master plan. And in that master plan, we'll define what environmentally sensitive features and how they're protected, and I think would really help the staff put a real good zone together. Lastly, I can't say more about community councils, and Mark Seeley explained them pretty well. It's basically a chance for the city to have a partnership with the neighborhood. I know they may look like another layer of government, but in the two that are there, a very close relationship with Kirkland and Bellevue, and it's like it's like having somebody up in that neighborhood, some people that have been duly elected that really know what's going on up there, and I think you can use them as a partner. Well, I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Okay.
Anyone else who wishes to speak during the public hearing on pre-annexation zoning? Anyone else who wishes to speak? Third call, hearing and seeing no one else who wishes to speak during the public hearing. The public hearing is closed at 8:10. The next public hearing this evening is Agenda Bill 6692, a moratorium for Initiative 502 recreational marijuana facilities. And we are again going to have a staff presentation, and this particular topic again has been referred to a council committee work session, or no, excuse me, has been reviewed by Land and Shore on August 13th, 2013. And after discussion, that committee recommended adoption of a moratorium and asked that the administration schedule a public hearing on that topic at the September 3rd regular council meeting. And I don't know if Chair, Councilmember Goodman, if you'd wish to add anything to that?
I guess my only question would be, do I make a motion now, or do I wait until after the staff
We
report?
wait until after the public hearing.
Thanks.
Good evening.
For the staff report. Thank you.
Good evening. I'll just give a brief presentation about I-502 and also about moratoriums. So Initiative 502 was approved by the voters of this state back in November of 2012. It provided for a legal recreational marijuana market. It also provided for the possession of up to an ounce of usable marijuana by adults over 21 in this state. It furthermore charged the Liquor Control Board of Washington with rulemaking and implementation of I-502 to create this market and make sure that it was being properly enforced. So the Liquor Control Board, to that end, hired some consultants, hired additional staff, and they issued some initial draft rules in May, which were circulated to stakeholders and the general public, and and that included cities, counties. They issued formal draft rules just before July 4th, and they received quite a bit of public comment and comment from local jurisdictions. Because of that, shortly before they were due to finalize those rules, they decided to pull back and delay implementation a little bit. So they're now planning to issue a further revision of the draft in mid-September. Because of this schedule change, they're now anticipating adopting rules in mid-October, with them becoming effective in mid-November. This would still have them meet their deadline of December 1st, 2013 to adopt the rules and begin taking license applications. The general breakdown of the Liquor Control Board rules as they were previously proposed in July shows that there would be 3 types of licenses they would issue. These would be for producers, or growers would be a more colloquial term for that. Processors, which would process the raw marijuana into a usable product that somebody could buy and then use. And then retailers, or more likely known as dispensaries, who would actually sell it to you or me. The application requirements for these licenses would include background checks. It would include a Washington residency check. You'd have to be a resident of this state to be able to get one of these licenses. They would have a disqualifying point system, which is very similar to what's currently in use for liquor licenses. So certain offenses would get you a certain number of points. If you get too many points, you're disqualified from getting one of these licenses. It would also mandate that you are a certain distance, 1,000 feet, from a long list of uses, which I'll get to in a second. And they're also requiring that you submit a business plan showing that you have the financial wherewithal to operate the facility you're proposing and have an idea of who you're going to sell to, how much you're going to sell, and things like that. I-502 also provided for 25% taxes at every stage of this market. So there would be 25% when it was sold from the grower to the processor, 25% more from the processor to the retailer, and a further 25% tax added when it's sold to a member of the public. These taxes would go to be used for public health programs, youth anti-drug programs, the administration of the I-502 market, and related programs along with that. They would require product labeling with the origin of the plant, the THC concentration, that's the active ingredient in marijuana, and also the usage warning saying that this may be hazardous to your health. The Liquor Control Board rules would also establish a limit on the number of licenses issued, and they would also specify that these facilities must be standalone. So you couldn't walk into QFC or Safeway or any grocery store and buy marijuana. You couldn't walk into a drugstore. This would be a complete separate facility. The separation requirements as laid out in I-502 require any of these facilities to be 1,000 feet from elementary and secondary schools, public playgrounds, recreation centers, public parks, transit centers, libraries, and game arcades. I-502 unfortunately didn't specify any of the definitions for these terms, and so the Liquor Control Board has been trying to figure these definitions out, and that's created a little bit of, not a little bit, but quite a bit of back and forth over what exactly is defined as a, what exactly is a recreation center, for example, what exactly is an elementary school. There is no requirement in I-502 or in the proposed rules to separate any of these marijuana facilities from one another, so you could, in theory, have two grow operations right next to each other. You could have 3 or 4 or 5 retailers all lined up in a row. This has been an issue, say, over in Seattle. I know at one particular intersection, which happens to be more than 1,000 feet away from all these various things, they're kind of referring to it already as the green light district, potentially. So that's another concern that they're looking at. The federal law and reaction has also been a large issue, and it's one that at the local level there's not much we can do about it, but it's certainly worth being aware of. Marijuana remains a Schedule I controlled substance under the Controlled Substances Act and is therefore illegal. That means that Congress has made a determination that this particular substance, marijuana, cannabis, has no medical value, it has no reasonable use, and it's completely banned. The U.S. Attorney's Office and the Drug Enforcement Agency have taken action against medical marijuana facilities in the past. Most recently in July there was a raid in, I believe, Olympia and somewhere in Seattle. Excuse me. They've done these raids before. They're likely to continue. They tend to focus their raids on facilities that are operating outside the bounds of local jurisdiction, of local ordinances that have been adopted. And then there's also another fairly long list of criteria. There's a letter from the Deputy Attorney General to U.S. attorneys, which came out just last week, and it has a fairly comprehensive list of criteria, including preventing the distribution of marijuana to minors, preventing revenue from sale of marijuana going to criminal enterprises, gangs, and cartels, keeping marijuana that's sold under, say, Washington's market in Washington and not going to California or to Idaho or Michigan or anywhere like that, preventing violence and use of firearms, preventing use of marijuana on public lands and on federal property, and several other things. It's important to realize, though, that this letter is merely giving guidance to U.S. attorneys and isn't binding on them, and the U.S. attorneys can maintain their individual discretion as to what actions they would or wouldn't take to enforce federal law. So moving on to moratorium, cities are allowed to adopt moratorium under state law. This is both under Growth Management Act and the section of law establishing code cities. Moratoria are intended to preserve the status quo and allow additional time for research and discussion and public input, like we're starting to have tonight. They can be for up to 6 months and can be extended for additional 6-month periods, provided the council holds another public hearing at the time they're extending it. Moratoria aren't, I wouldn't call them common, but they're also not uncommon. Issaquah enacted one just a couple of years ago related to medical marijuana. That was a 6-month moratorium. We expired it just short of 6 months when we adopted ordinance 2633 relating to medical marijuana. In the case of recreational marijuana, cities of Olympia and Bellingham and Sammamish have already enacted moratoria regarding recreational marijuana, so we're not alone in considering a moratorium. So for our proposed moratorium, this is only a partial list of issues that we're hoping to look at during the moratorium. One of them is the number of licenses issued. The Liquor Control Board has been very clear that there is a limit, but they're not clear about what the limit is and how exactly they determine it. So we call it a black box. They feed a bunch of things in and the number comes out. But that's something that we'd definitely like to talk with them more about. As I mentioned before, the exact definitions of these various uses requiring separation. How do you define a school for the purposes of this law? How do you define a recreation center and things like that? We would like to have a better understanding of the potential market for recreational marijuana. It's very unknown right now because, of course, this hasn't really been tried in the United States. Certainly, we'd like to have a very robust public process and get more public input and understanding of these issues and other issues. And so, therefore, we're proposing a moratorium that would extend until March 2014. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Does the council have any questions of staff? Yes, Councilmember Scher.
Thank you, Mayor. With the moratorium, and I don't remember from the last time we did this on the collective gardens, is the 6 months the statutory required time frame, or can the council set that at a lesser or greater number?
The council could set it at a lesser number. If there is an option to set a higher number up to 1 year, but we would have to come up with a specific work plan to do so.
So I guess to piggyback on that, what is the rationale for having a moratorium to the maximum 6 months of March 3rd when the state is expected to issue its rules in October, November, the end of this year?
Largely because the state law does allow for a 6-month moratorium, and it means that we are afforded that much time to discuss this issue further, and it, if you will, reduces the pressure. There's no pressure we could say have a moratorium to go until December 1st as one example, and have to feel like we're in a hurry to finish it, or we feel like we have a lot of time to make sure all our ducks are in a row.
Any other questions from council? With that, the public hearing on this topic is opened at 8:22 p.m. And I will ask if there are people signed up to speak.
Yes, we have one person, Lori Hoff.
Okay. Could you call that name again, please?
So we have one person who signed up. Her name is Lori Hoff. I guess I will note for the record that she is not here, not present.
All right, then I will ask if there are people who have not signed up to speak, who are present this evening, who wish to speak to this topic. Yes, sir.
Just for this topic, or is that for the topic on the agenda?
For this topic only. It's the topic of the public hearing. So is there anyone else who wishes to speak on the topic of a moratorium for recreational marijuana? Anybody who wishes to speak on that topic? Third call, anyone who is present and wishes to speak on that topic? Seeing and hearing no one who is present to speak on that topic, the public hearing is closed at 8:24, and the topic is now before the council for discussion. Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to move to adopt ordinance
2686.
adopting a moratorium on the establishment of recreational marijuana facilities, defining recreational marijuana facilities, adopting findings of facts and conclusions, and establishing an effective date and expiration date.
Okay, moved by Goodman, seconded by Winterstein. And the topic is now open for discussion by the council. Or questions? Councilmember Goodman.
Oh, well, I will just comment briefly on the reasons that the committee, I'll speak for the committee in general, and of course committee members can make their own comments. But I think the recommendation to move forward with a 6-month moratorium was largely already mentioned by Jason, and that basically was that the state has yet to adopt the regulations. There's still a lot of questions around those, and so the committee felt that it would be prudent to let that process play out first. And then the second major reason is because we were interested in a public process here in our community, and we haven't had that public process yet, so I'll be supporting this.
Councilmember Butler.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will be supporting the ordinance also. It is the words elementary or secondary school, playgrounds, recreation centers, facilities, the whole list there is difficult to decide, and we're dealing, well, I won't, the medical marijuana approval of that identified a number of things, and this is an opportunity to get it right and to make sure that the public and that we understand what those terms mean and vet that process in a way that everyone understands what we're doing. And I would rather take the time and deliberate in a way that that we involve the public to make sure that we're doing the right thing.
Councilmember Scher.
Thank you, Mayor. Personally, I believe the federal government's refusal to consider marijuana as anything other than a Schedule I narcotic is based on outdated information, an ignorance of science, and a pervasive fear related to failed movements such as prohibition. But tonight's vote isn't about any of those things. Rather, Initiative 502 required the Liquor Control Board to create rules, including how much marijuana a retail outlet may have on site without violating state law. So the retail outlets are allowed. The question is simply one of making sure the details are properly examined first. As was mentioned in the presentation, we enacted a moratorium on collective gardens originally before finally passing our ordinance in December of 2011. And yes, it really has been that long already. So I would concur with Councilmember Goodman and Council President Butler that this limited moratorium is the best course of action to properly examine and implement the provisions of I-502 with respect to retail marijuana outlets. The few extra months between rulemaking and March of 2014 will not have a significant negative impact, in my opinion. I will re-emphasize implement in March 2014, however, because I believe once the state's rules are in place, we should proceed to uphold the law, which was adopted by a majority of Washington citizens, and we should then move forward with appropriate zoning of those legitimate businesses. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Councilmember Martz.
Yeah, I want to speak a little bit further about the process in 2011, because I think at the time that we enacted a moratorium in 2011, there were members of the community who were concerned that this would become a perpetuated moratorium and that we were just kicking the issue down the road. And I think what people saw was that this council acted with real deliberation. We took a lot of input from the community, from our police force, from concerned citizens, and we were able to craft a piece of legislation with medical marijuana that did address the public safety concerns and nonetheless was afforded patients the ability to access medical marijuana. And so you saw a 6-month moratorium, and then you saw us lift it and enact that legislation. This council doesn't avoid challenging issues. I think this council acts decisively after due deliberation, and I am very confident that in this case we will craft policy that ensures public safety while still respecting individual liberty. Thanks.
Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I, too, will be supporting the 6-month moratorium this evening. I think there's, as we've heard from the other council members, that this council takes its time, it studies the issues, and I think it's very important to make sure that we're taking the public input that we need to understand what it means to our community and community implements. We need to understand those definitions. As we were working through medical marijuana, there were a lot of questions that came forward, and we took our time and we studied it and we thoroughly understood, and even then there were still questions that have come up in regards to it. So I think it's important to be able to take our time, making sure that we're doing what is appropriate for our community and taking all the input we can before we move forward with this. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions or comments from the council? Any additional questions or comments? Are you ready to proceed to a vote on this topic? All those who are in favor of adopting ordinance 2686, adopting a moratorium on the establishment of recreational marijuana facilities, defining recreational marijuana facilities, and adopting findings of fact and conclusions, and establishing an effective date and expiration date, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passed unanimously. I have a question for City Attorney Tanaka, and that has to do with the first public hearing, which we had. There is a second one scheduled for October 7th of this year, and the statement in this said that the council does not take any formal action at the end of this hearing. The council did not take any formal action at the end of the hearing, but I didn't ask the council about any formal action. Would it be appropriate then to ask the council's input at this time?
Yes, in fact, I was going to make that very comment, Your Honor.
Excellent. I'm glad that you agree that I should correct the error I made by not asking the council for its comments. So we are back, council, on the item of the first public hearing, which was a public hearing on the preparation of an ordinance establishing pre-annexation zoning and other items. And so I will ask for the council's input on this topic. Councilmember Butler.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. During the public hearing, I heard a number of concerns expressed about the pre-annexation zoning that I believe I would like additional information on. One, there was a comment that our zoning versus King County's zoning would make it more dense. I also heard that since the Klahanie community is, and not my words, but words that I heard, quite old, redevelopment was a potential at some time in the future. And so I would like a better understanding of how that would work and how the proposed zoning would contribute to that. And then I heard comments around permanent open space and environmentally sensitive areas and concerns that alluded to the fact that perhaps the proposed zoning would not protect those areas. So I'd like some clarification on that. And that's what I drew from those who spoke earlier at the public hearing.
Other comments from the council? Councilmember Winterstein.
Yeah, I would be, thank you very much. I'd be very interested in getting the timing and the sequence of events, the clarification on that, the timing of our public hearing relative to the Boundary Review Board discussion. I think that issue was raised by the first speaker, and I would like to, if we could put together a timeline and identify any potential timing issues in that timeline, I'd appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councilmember Goodman.
Thank
Excuse
you. The council received a couple of email letters, one at 5:30 and one about 5:30 and one about 6 o'clock, so I haven't had a chance to really go through those. And they have questions about urban village zoning and some, like I said, I haven't had a chance to go through them, but I would think that I would like to have those, any issues that are raised in those letters to be addressed.
Councilmember Martz.
I'm a visual person, so if I could, the next time we talk about this, I would like to see a map either superimposed or separately of those features afforded special protections. And then I also can't tell in this picture the single-family suburban versus the single-family small lot. I don't think I'm colorblind, but the subtleties of those two shades of green elude me. Thank you.
One is a more intense green than the other, but it is not readily apparent.
If you say so.
From a distance. I can see it from here, but just. Any other questions or issues that the council would like addressed? I have made note of what you have said and would expect that at the second public hearing that the staff presentation or a staff presentation would include those items. Councilmember Butler?
If that information is available before the second public hearing, I think it would be helpful to have that clarification when it is ready so that we could look at and study it.
Councilmember Faulkner.
I would also be interested if staff would be able to put together or get us something on the master plan community so we can get an idea of what the original intent was and see if the original intent still meets the intent, the zoning that we want to put on there now.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any other items on this topic? Yes.
It would be appropriate for the council to set the second public hearing by formal action.
All right.
If they don't want to do the first suggested one, that's okay too.
All right, is there a motion to that effect? Okay. You actually have to state the motion. All right.
Stacy, are you on your mic on?
Is that the correct one? Okay, I'll start over. I would direct Move to direct the administration to, 1, prepare an ordinance establishing pre-annexation zoning for the Klahanie Potential Annexation Area that are comparable with the zoning currently applied by King County based on the preliminary zoning maps and IMC 18.06.060 annexation classification, and 2, schedule the second required public hearing for October 7th, 2013.
Second.
Okay, moved by Goodman and seconded by Forkner. Discussion, Councilmember Scherer.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I didn't have any questions about this, but now that there's a motion, I feel compelled to address the motion on the floor. The map that's shown here on the screen has, as you can see, a very tiny area connected to the existing city limits. It shows a multitude of established single-family properties compared to multifamily properties. It shows a very, very small area of retail. And compare that map, if you will, in your mind to the one just south of the PAA, where the Issaquah Highlands is experiencing exponential growth, long-term development agreements, and a new addition to the urban village family at the lakeside site. By contrast to other areas of the city, such as the Highlands or the central area as planned, this PAA itself shows virtually no similar growth potential based on these zoning classifications. Indeed, the intent shown in this map is to utilize existing King County zoning. So the question in my mind is, why even annex from the county into the city at all? I'm not going to belabor all the points I raised in the prior vote, but I would submit it's really in the pursuit of revenue, whether it's grant funding or the sales tax annexation credit. We've already been recently told in committee since that last vote that Public Works Operations is considering deferring critical street overlays until it's known what annexation would do to staffing levels. We've been told that the capacity and safety improvements on Fall City Road will be placed in the hopper to compete against other capital projects, such as a pedestrian walkway near Greenwood Point, a previously annexed area, or projects in the central area plan that would enhance getting across I-90 and spare us from massive traffic jams at exit 15 or 17. So I'm not going to vote in support of directing the preparation of an ordinance because I don't support the decision to annex these subdivisions. They are geographically closer to Sammamish, and with respect to the issue at hand, they are closer to the existing zoning of the city of Sammamish.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Scherer. That was, the chair would suggest, tangentially related to pre-annexation zoning, but certainly an expression of your thoughts. Is there further discussion on the motion as presented? Any further discussion? Are you ready then to act upon that? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Right. That was 6 ayes and 1 nay with Mr. Scherer in opposition. Okay, the next items to come before the council this evening are items of regular business. And the first one is Agenda Bill 6676, having to do with the relocation and enhancement of the skateboard park. And this is a outgrowth of previous discussion that the council heard when amongst other times, when the park bond was presented as a topic, proposed park bond was presented as a topic, and earlier during various council goal-setting retreats. So with that, I will ask our city staff to please present this item.
Brian, I think they're having trouble hearing you.
Is that better? Ooh, there we go. Nice. Sorry about that. Oh yeah, first I wanted to thank those of you that were able to show up to the Confluence Park grand opening last week. Thank you very much. We're still receiving very positive comments on that event, and the family members have extended many thanks to everyone.
I'm here tonight to discuss Agenda Bill 6676 to relocate and enhance the existing Issaquah skate park. The relocation and enhancement of the skate park has been one of the council priorities since 2010. This topic was presented to the Service and Safety Committee on July 17th with a recommendation to return to council under regular business for approval. A copy of the memo on the next steps and things to consider was presented at the Service and Safety meeting and is included in your council packet tonight, as well as a document explaining the funding sources and estimated expenses associated with building a new skate park. This is a list of professional design build companies that were consulted in the assembly of the information that's presented to you tonight. These companies inform me that the industry standard for design build today is anywhere from $30 to $40 per square foot. It's listed on the slide, and again, this is also in your council packet. We went out and took some pictures of some local skate parks around Issaquah, just to give you a look and feel of sort of what's immediately around us. So I'll quickly go through some of these parks, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Here we have one of the Bellevue skate parks. It's a, it caters to skaters that are in the beginning to intermediate levels. It's in a highly visible location. It's located next to a ball field, YMCA, and an indoor skate park located in the Highlands Community Center. As you can see from the design, it doesn't have many advanced elements, and it's relatively basic in design. Here's the Redmond Skate Park. This skate park caters to a variety of skill levels, located in a highly visible area next to residential housing and one of the Redmond fire stations. This park also had a couple graffiti walls, which you can see there in the bottom right-hand corner is an example of one of them. Yeah.
Yes.
As you're going through these, do you have cost per square foot estimates on what they cost to build?
I do, but they were all these were built so long ago that a lot of them were. I have the Sammamish skate park, and I will be addressing some because we have some recent quotes for what skate parks would go within a price range. If that would help, I'd be happy to present or share those others with you. But would you like me to back up and go over those too?
Well, I guess my question comes to, you're talking about the difference in feature level in the different parks, and the information that we've got in this bill is more a sort of a standard per square foot. And so what I'm struggling with is that a per square foot for a more, for a Bellevue style skate park or for Redmond style skate park? So I'm trying to get my arms around that, and however you want to talk about that would be helpful.
I'm with you on that one because I tried to ferret that one out with the people we were speaking with, and there's a varying degree of levels of, are you going with colored concrete? Are you going with just plain gray concrete? So your prices fluctuate based on what and how many elements do you choose to put in, because your prices do fluctuate. With the more advanced elements that you put into a skate park, it rises in conjunction with your price as well. They were giving me, I said, for a fits beginning, intermediate, and advanced level skaters, what builds a good skate park? What is the industry standard? That was the question I posed to these three organizations, and that's where the $30 to $40, which even $30 to $40 per square foot is a semi-sizable range in itself. I'll show you some of we can come back. I do have the numbers on these, but some of them they were built in the late 90s, like with ours. Some of them, the numbers, some of them didn't even have numbers they could get us when we were talking to the cities. So, but I do have them if we'd like to come back to them.
Thank you.
Here's the Mercer Island Skate Park. This caters to beginning and intermediate level skaters. It's in a remote location. It's next to a ball field and a tot lot. The staff here reported that the park has little activity due to its remote location. Here we have the Renton Skate Park. This is in a highly visible location, located adjacent to ball fields, sports courts, and a tot lot. This is the one that's off on your right-hand side as you're going south on I-405. Here we have the North Bend Skate Park. This is another skate park that caters to a variety of skill levels. It also is in a remote location with a ball field and a large climbing wall adjacent to it. You can see the little picture, and there's the bowl. You can see the skating bowl. That bowl was designed too steep, and the skaters don't even use it. It's just something that speaks to, and maybe this was built in the late 90s, but speaks to the importance of design when developing a skate park. And the one closest to us that we're probably all most familiar with is the Sammamish Skate Park. This 10,000 square foot skate park was built in 2007 for an estimated cost of $300,000. Moving forward, an interesting observation was that when we went and took pictures of all the skate parks, we did it on a weekday morning, and the skate parks that were highly visible, accessible, all had park activity in them. The ones that were remote didn't. So it was just not an absolute, but it was an interesting observation. So where are we at in today's market? The design build companies provided us with some examples of what the city could expect for different price ranges, which I'm told, I hope this speaks to what you're looking for. This was also provided in your council packet. As I mentioned, these numbers are based on what I was quoted for and speaking with the companies on the industry standard to build a skate park today. And these figures that I put up before you are based on a low of $35 and a high of $40. I didn't drop it down to $30. I went with the $35 to $40 range per square foot. This information does not include land value. In researching land values, it's really challenging to come up with location and size of lots vary greatly depending on where you're buying and where you're looking at. So there was a pretty big price differential in that. So for the purpose of this presentation, we just are assuming that the skate park would be built on city property. And as I mentioned before, the prices of the skate parks do vary based on the elements. The higher degree of skill, the higher elements do raise the pricing a little bit because it's a little bit more intricate work. Councilmember Barber?
Brian, can you give us an idea where Sammamish falls in as far as square feet?
Yes, I'm sorry. Sammamish falls into 10,000 square feet. And again, I didn't mention either that we know that this one's located right out in front of the city hall, police station, and library. So it's highly visible as well. And it is for all uses. So it's 10,000 square feet. And this is, like I said, this is just a breakdown of 4, 6, 8, 10, and 12,000 square feet, what you're looking for based on what the companies I spoke with told me. Here we have the current Issaquah Skate Park. It was built in 1997. It's 5,600 square feet, and it was built for an estimated $75,000. Estimated on the estimated cost to design, build the same skate park today would be $196,000 to $224,000. And when speaking with staff on an estimated maintenance cost, we estimate that $8,000 a year is spent maintaining the park. And this would include removal and cleanup of garbage, graffiti and debris removal, pressure washing, equipment and supplies. Staff estimates that a new skate park in a different location will lead to the same, if not decreased, maintenance expenses. I'd also like to point out, if you look at this picture and all the other pictures we had beforehand, the Issaquah Skate Park is the only one with a high fence surrounding the park structure. Here's the first example, and these the top two were provided by Spawn Ranch. This is for price ranges between $150,000 and $250,000. Spawn Ranch provided these designs of things they've built, and they gave the simulated design of it because it really shows the whole park. The lower one is Sept Skate Park that was built by Grindline Skate Parks. And as you can see, not a huge footprint, number of elements, and like I say, a couple nice park designs there. Here we have $300,000 to $375,000. Again, the top two are provided by Spawn Ranch, and the bottom one is Judkins Skate Park in Seattle that was built by Grindline Skate Parks. As you can see, the footprint's a little bigger. Higher degree of difficulty in the elements provided there. And lastly, we have $400,000 to $600,000, some examples of, some parks that were put together by these companies. Again, the top two by Spawn Ranch, and the Round Rock Skate Park is built in Houston, Texas by Grindline Skate Parks. They're also currently in Houston, Texas, building a 75,000 square foot skate park, which is going to be the largest one in the country. Interesting. Moving on, if the council approves funding for the relocation enhancement of the existing skate park in the 2014 budget, Some considerations in determining a site will be the park is highly visible. It's accessible to all ages and abilities, especially teens and preteens. That it has minimal impact to surrounding neighbors, especially concerning noise and hours of use. That it would welcome all levels of skaters, beginners, intermediate, and advanced. Safe, family-friendly environment for everyone to enjoy. And that has potential, or at least not, and if not potential, but it consider the potential for future growth. And then, like I said, if approved for the relocation and enhancement of this existing skate park, the next steps for us would be to form a community group, work with the community group and public to select a site, hire a design build consultant, work with community group and public to select design and build a skate park. We foresee that there'd be at least a minimum of 2 to 4 public meetings for each of the site and design selection process. Those phases would require a number of public meetings because they would be developed and figured out as a community. So that wouldn't be, so we figured 2 to 4 meetings for each of those. And then the funding would come $150 from the real estate excise tax and $200,000 from Park Mitigation Fund. And if approved, we believe we could complete this project by the end of 2014. And that would be the end. If there's any questions? Yeah, Councilmember Marsh.
Of that 350, is some of that necessary to repurpose the existing park, and if so, how much?
Absolutely, and the exact price, I'm going to defer to my colleague. What would the price be for the?
$50,000, that would cover the demolition and the repurposing of the site, and bring it back to a normal grade.
I'm sorry, did you hear that? It was $50,000 for the demo and repurposing of that site.
So really talking about potentially a $300,000
Correct.
park. One of the reasons that I ask is as I look at some of those, I've been lucky enough to get to meet with some of the kids in the community. And one of the things that, they have certain things that they specifically look for. One of the things I was struck by in some of the more low-cost options, they don't have bowls. And evidently the bowls are very important to the kids. So in this process, I want to make sure that I understand that we're going to be in a price point to have some of those features that the skaters consider really important. So, we seem to sort of be nearing the cusp of that maybe at the $300,000 point based on what you were showing us.
Right, and I think that's right about there. And what's neat about the different skate park organizations I spoke with is and they do design build. So they design and then they build, and a lot of these companies have skaters that work for them. So, and it was really neat when I talked to one of them, they're like, oh yeah, what we like to do is we like to take the skating kids out to different parks, and that's where we hold our public meeting. We skate a few parks and talk to them about what they really like. And I was like, and that's just really neat that you have people that actually know skating that are building the parks in a lot of these organizations. Well, actually, all 3 that I spoke with have, either current skaters or ex-skaters that are working for the organization.
Councilmember Frechner?
Throughout the discussions that we've had over the last couple months about the skateboard park, the school district has said unofficially or officially that they were interested in partnering with the city, especially if we could get rid of the one that's causing the problem to get it moved to someplace else. Has there been any specific discussions with the school board or school district about cost sharing on this, and to what degree or anything like that?
Good question. It's been discussed numerous times because there's been a variety of topics that have come up related to that skate park. We have talked sometimes with the construction of their project they have going with Issaquah Middle School. Like I said, once again, nothing formally. But whether or not that could be, they're talking about bridging a road over from 2nd Avenue to there. Whether or not there's some efficiencies that can be met through that, I think that would have to be ferreted out.
Councilmember Goodman?
I would like to follow up with that and suggest that maybe specifically we ask the school district if they may be interested in some kind of cost sharing with the demolition of the existing park. I think they would have the most interest in that. And one of the questions I had, you have next steps up there, form a community group. We're talking about the companies that you've talked to involving the skateboarders. Would there be, I would hope that there would be a specific effort to get all segments of the community involved in that discussion?
Absolutely.
And that we take the efforts, make sure that unconventional approaches, if you will, need to be taken to make sure that we hear those voices.
Yeah. No, agreed.
Thanks.
Councilmember Barber and then Councilmember Scher.
I just wanted to move forward with a motion, please. Move to direct administration to fund the skate park, allocating $350,000. $150,000 of that will come from REIT, $200,000 from Parks and Mitigation, and in the 2014 preliminary budget.
Second.
Okay, moved by Barber and seconded by Martz and Councilmember Scher.
Thank you, Mayor. I had a question. The funding sources through the Park Mitigation Fund and the Real Estate Excise Fund, do we have any information on the relative health of those two funds, in the sense that is there any risk that if the council didn't approve the funding at this time through those funds, that those dollars would be used for some other purpose in 2014? Is there a lot of money in those funds? Is this kind of the end of the barrel for these funds?
I don't know the exact I don't know the exact balances in the funds, but we have worked with the finance director to assure that the funds are available. Is that?
Well, and is there anything else in your department's hopper that these funds would or could be used for in 2014 other than this project?
Well, we always have a variety of projects, but this is the one we deem as most important at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Barber.
Thank you. When Parks came before Services Committee meeting, we reviewed this at great length in consideration and had asked specifically for the handout to be connected, included with this agenda bill, because I think it speaks very well to the intended process that the Parks Department is intending to go through to make sure that the site selection is going to be an appropriate one, but that all of the elements that are there are going to be having a very large output or outreach to our community as far as making sure that we get the right piece, the right tricks, the right jumps, whatever they are, that the kids want in the right location. When the current park, skateboard park went in, behind the community center, that was thought to be the ideal place for it. You know, right next door, we'd be able to observe it. Well, it didn't quite work out that way, but time has changed. I mean, a lot has changed, and it originally started out to be very well attended and was actually pushed forward by a large group of our young citizens in town who came before this council and spoke very eloquently and presented their desire for a skateboard park. And now sort of time has changed, it's moved on. It's now time for us to look at a relocation of this. And I'm very confident that I have sat in on a number of the parks boards outreach for other amenities to our community, and it is usually a very thorough, very good outreach. So I'm feeling comfortable with that, and I'm looking forward to seeing what comes of this.
Thank you.
Other questions? Councilmember Winterstein.
Thank you. Thanks, Brian. So I want to repeat something I heard you say earlier, just for the benefit of my colleagues on the council. So these costs they assume the use of city land. So there's no acquisition of land in this. So that immediately puts a constraint on it that we have land available that meets our location criteria. So I'm kind of,
correct.
And I don't want to put you on any spot or anything, but you've probably given us some thought.
No, because you brought it to me before I've given it a lot of thought.
Okay. I realize this is, I don't want to get ahead of the process, but what current city land do you think could meet, in your estimate, could meet the location requirements?
There are a number of properties we would probably pull up from the past when we did the first, site survey for where we ended up with the existing skate park. I believe there were 7 or 8 sites that we had on that one. Mm-hmm. And I mean, some of them were Memorial Park, Tibbetts Valley Park, over by Gibson. I don't think I can name them all by name, but I'm not even sure that we'll probably even have some more that might be available for, looking at now. And land's not it's not, it could be an option, it just would be above and beyond this agenda bill. We'd have to seek additional funding to purchase a property if that were the case.
So you're of the impression, at least at this point, that the city already possesses a suitable location? Do you have that? Is that your gut feel?
I would say that, yeah, I think we have a lot of properties to look at to ferret out a good location, yeah.
Okay. Okay. And the ones that you mentioned were all in the valley?
Mm-hmm.
You know, what if the best location based upon this committee selection was up in the Highlands?
Well, there has been a site discussed up there as well.
But I'm just kind of wondering what if this council has some type of assumption, or maybe, yeah, an assumption in their minds about where we thought the location would be. I mean, I think it'd be interesting conversation. Until we start really thinking about the sites and available land, we think about where the current one is. I guess I was assuming location would be down in this area in the valley, but we don't know that.
No.
So I think that we all need to go forward, if we go forward with this, keeping that in mind, that if we had a sense to ourselves of where we thought the ideal location would be, it might be something, you know, completely different. Not that there's anything wrong with those locations, just the point is, I think it's been an assumption in all our conversations that it would be somewhere in proximity to where the current one is, and that may or may not be the case.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So those provided costs, those per square foot costs, obviously, you know, construction, labor, materials. I think you showed some examples where some of those maybe were set in a park setting. I think you even mentioned at one time that there was more of some kind of park development around it as well.
Yeah, many of the parks have adjacent ball fields, tot lots, and that. Is that what you're talking about? Yeah, like a lot of the skate parks did have other amenities around them as well. They weren't, I'm trying to think if there's any I don't know if there was any standalone.
Okay, so and
they all had adjacent amenities.
Right, and so that cost that we were quoted, kind of the per square foot, did it or did not include any adjacent amenities?
No, that's just the skate park.
Okay, just the actual.
That's everything from beginning to end on a skate park. I was very specific with them about I wanted the, you know, bow wrapped around it pricing.
What about, do we think an EIS would be required? What if, what if it came up that, you know, this location or that location would require additional parking, for example?
Yeah, good question.
I mean, that's another cost. I don't think that I'm pretty sure isn't in that square footage piece at all. And so, you know, lighting, infrastructure, utilities, whatever it might take to construct that, I would imagine there would be potentially some other costs not in those numbers as well. And then I'm going to go back to kind of pick up on the question Councilmember Scher asked. So you've identified an amount of $200,000 from the Park Mitigation Fund. Now, can that go up or down? Is there, you know, I know that we have obligations to money that we collect from for mitigation to use within a certain period of time. There's other, you know, constraints on the use of this. Is that 200? Is there any variability in that 200? Is there more potential in that fund that we could use if we choose, or is this pretty much?
I'd have to work with administration on that.
So I
believe there would be some flexibility.
And I guess really the same question comes from the balance, that 150 part that you propose. Now I know that what we're considering tonight is really to direct the administration to include this item in the 2014 budget proposal. And I think when we get to the budget deliberation later in the year, those might be good opportunities to review some of those kind of the two fund source questions about you know, can those numbers change, or really what I think, as Councilmember Scher asked, the status of those, and what their balances are now and what could be used. So you know, thank you for those. And I just kind of in summary, the idea, I like the idea. I like that we're pursuing this. My sense is there's potentially a lot of other costs than just the square footage construction that we're seeing here today. I've already heard demolition of the existing one, and other site nearby amenities, mitigations due to an EIS, potentially land acquisition. This could really. I think we got to keep in mind that the numbers we've seen tonight include a number of assumptions, and there certainly exist the opportunities that both where it's located and what the true cost to the city is could be quite different. Thank you.
Other questions or discussion? Councilmember Scher.
Thank you. I want to preface my comments by saying that I fully support doing a new skateboard park and relocating from the existing site. As the agenda bill mentions, this has long been a city goal for the past several years. And so it's high time that we move forward on doing so. But there's 2 points I want to make about this, and I'll try to stay laser focused on the motion here. The first issue is I believe that we can do something more with the skateboard park. We can make it a recreation destination that goes beyond just a skateboard park. We can include other amenities through the use of appropriate funds to enhance whatever site location is ultimately chosen, whether that involves a basketball court, a playground, a picnic area, something to bring other people, to bring families into the location. As it currently stands, the skateboard park is sort of an isolated, standalone recreational amenity for a select group of users. And we have a golden opportunity through this process to dream bigger and do something better. And these were concerns I raised when we talked about the park bond as well, and some of the projects that were in there. So just to move forward only on relocation of the skateboard park, I think might be selling ourselves a little short of what we can really do with maybe just even a little bit more money to bring in a wider group of users and really make this a destination. Secondly, I'm concerned about the process here. It really seems like this request this evening puts the cart before the horse. When we look at transportation projects, the first thing that's done in a transportation project is design. And you don't start actually building something or spending money or allocating money unless it's simply for the purpose of design. And then when you finally get to the end road, then you know what it is you're going to be doing because you have that design in hand, and then you can begin the construction of it. Here, we're sort of being asked to do the opposite. We don't know any details. Councilmember Winterstein has raised a number of points this evening about the potential cost, and a lot of the responses have been, we'll talk about it later, maybe, if, we don't know. It's a lot of speculation. And the recommendation says that upon consensus and adopting this motion, there would be a project schedule including outreach, determining the appropriate location, determining appropriate amenities, and then moving forward with bid and construction. I would prefer to see us know where it's going to be, what it's going to look like, what we're going to do before I'm willing to suggest that we should allocate $350,000, a very specific amount, in the 2014 budget. It seems to me that if these funds are not at the bottom of the barrel, so to speak, the money will be there. And the money will be there and probably not reallocated for another project within the Parks Department in the 2014 budget because, as you mentioned, this is a fairly high priority. So I don't think there's a risk in holding off on the allocation of these funds officially until such time as the outreach and the siting and the design have been determined by staff. And then the council can move forward with the full confidence that we know what it is we're actually looking at doing for the community. So I can't support this motion, but I would, if this were not to pass, I would support a motion in the future, definitely to move forward with relocating and rebuilding the skate park in a new location, wherever that may be. Thanks.
Can I clarify real quick? Maybe I wasn't clear. I'm sorry. we were looking in that, to address that process of the selection. In the past, when we did the first skate park, we engaged the community in that process. So that's the reasoning behind not knowing where, because we haven't, that would be the start of the project, getting them engaged and helping them, having them be a part of the selection and site selection for the skate park.
Councilmember Faulkner and then Councilmember Marks.
Yeah, just to give a little more information on that, I know the community groups that the Parks Board has put together has worked on an awful lot of different projects throughout the years, the levy programs and things like that. I think one of the things that the council seems to be missing here is that the public outreach is what's going to help us determine the location, the size, and things like that. The public outreach is a lot simpler to do if the people that are working know that they have a budget and they know what that budget is. If they don't know that there's a budget, all of a sudden the $35 to $40 a square foot can very easily become $50 or $60 a square foot. And if the budget is known ahead of time, it's easier to go to the community group and say, the council has put this amount in the budget for 2014, so we don't want to go over it. And I think that will also help address Councilman Winterstein's concerns that if there are other added features to the park that come up through the community group, again, if they know what the limit is, all of those can be assessed at the same time. Having served on the Parks Board, having served on some of the levy committees and stuff, I have all the faith in the world that a community group that the Parks Board can put together will come up with all those answers before we're worried about whether the money is spent or not. And I think they will give us a really good evaluation of what can be done and what it's going to cost, and give a real good report of what the community wants.
Councilmember Marks.
So I'll be supporting this bill this evening. I'm one of two council members who had this as a submitted goal for this year, and this has been a goal that I've supported twice in the last 3 years. And so I'm thrilled to see it in front of us today, and I'm thrilled at the good job the Parks Department has done to put this information in front of us so that we can be better educated as we go forward. I think that the genesis of this bill right now is that we have a council goal for this year to make progress on this issue, which at least a majority of us considered critically important when we met for goal setting this year, and that this did not, the process that led to the Parks Bond, this did not come out of that because the user community for a skate park is smaller than the community that wants to preserve open space and add more general parks, and so they are very passionate, but they are smaller. And this bill is a way for the council to respond to that. In terms of council member Scher's concerns about this being a large amount of money without details, we've put forward a Parks Bond that has some general numbers for things, trusting that as we move forward, that the details of those will be reviewed and will be found to be a good fit for us. And I heartily agree with Councilmember Faulkner that this process unleashes a lot of enthusiasm in the community, and I think having a marker out there to both to encourage that conversation and also to bound it to some extent, that we're not going to have a 75,000 square foot skate park, I think is important and helps everyone who contributes time and energy to this process to know that it's going to be going towards a real concrete outcome. Thank you.
Other questions or comments from the council? Any other questions or comments? Are you ready to act then upon the motion, which is to direct the administration to fund the skate park, allocating $350,000 as described in the 2014 preliminary budget? So you are asking that when the administration presents its budget, that this amount of money be included in it. Okay? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Okay, 6 ayes and 1 nay. Councilmember Scher in opposition. The next item to come before the council this evening, under regular business, is Agenda Bill 6667, transfer of development rights code amendments, and this is coming back to the council. It has been discussed at the Land and Shore Committee June 11th of this year and July 9th of this year, and following discussion and input from King County and the Talus Master Developer, the committee recommended approval of the amendment and asked that it be heard under regular business. So I will ask Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you,
to
Madam
introduce
Mayor.
this.
You are correct. We had an agenda bill for a couple of months, but we actually began looking at this much earlier this year and have had discussions, I believe, at every single Land and Shore for 6 or 7 months. And we have somewhat of a staff presentation, but very basically you'll recall that we began a review of the ordinance for a couple of reasons. One is to provide a way to pre-sell TDRs, and that question sort of arose out of the Lakeside Development Agreement, where the 1,200 ERU entitlement was 700 base units and 500 additional TDRs, and the question of what happens if we don't have all of those TDRs already was raised by I think it was either PPC or UVDC. And second, we were interested in seeing what we might be able to do to improve the TDR ordinance, in that it has been sort of lackluster the past several years, and we wanted to look at maybe making it a better code, more clear code, maybe a more robust program. So that's what we've been looking at, and with that I'll let Keith Niven present.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and City Council. Keith Niven, the city's Economic Development Director. And I'm going to go through a fairly quick presentation. We've been talking about this, as Councilmember Goodman said, for quite some time. And I'll show you that a little bit later. But basically, why make the changes? So the city's TDR code was passed in 2007. And the purpose is to basically move density from certain places in town to other places where you want the density. And so, as Councilmember Goodman said, when we approved the Lakeside Development Agreement, it was basically, and as we heard from Tim Lee earlier this evening during public comments, there was a base entitlement of 700 ERUs, equivalent residential units, which were given as part of that development agreement, and then another 500 base entitlement that needed to be purchased through the TDR program. And part of that was to help jumpstart our city's TDR program and to create a market, because I think what we saw was that there really was not a natural market for the TDR program in town. There were also issues. Once we opened this door and went through it, there were issues. We found that the process was really complicated, and that there was a lot of process. And I think what we saw was, if there was ways to streamline that, that was really in keeping with kind of the current charge of the administration. And then the last thing is the Central Issaquah plan. We basically created a density bonus program within that plan, but TDRs could also work within the central core area. That's all basically a TDR receiving site. This chart actually reads pretty well up there. So this shows you the history of the TDR program in the city. And basically what it shows is, and I want to focus you on the bottom box, which is what TDRs were actually purchased or moved and developed on. From 2007 to 2009, we had 2 TDRs that were actually used in development projects in town. And then in 2010 and 2011, there actually was quite a bit of TDR activity, but those were basically part of the Park Point development agreement process. And so even though there's a kind of a big number of TDRs that were moved around in town, it was part of a city-sponsored goal to preserve the Park Point property. So it's a little bit deceiving when you look at the straight numbers. So the proposed changes, the TDR code had priority sites. So the open spaces, we had really really special open spaces and then some that were maybe less special but still special. And so part of this was by getting rid of Park Point, it was the biggest priority one open space that we were trying to preserve. By preserving Park Point, it basically left us with really one color of green left on the map. And so one of the things that we talked about was getting rid of the priorities and just making it sending sites and receiving sites. We also added parkland as a benefit. So part of what the TDR code would do would be to transfer development rights out of open space. And one of the amendments to the code is to also allow for the acquisition of parkland, which would also include the extinguishment of development rights on those properties. It would allow the city to pre-sell TDR certificates. It would streamline the process, making it a level 1 review to create a sending site and a level 3 review to turn a site into a receiving site. We added the terminology equivalent residential units, which was similar to what we've done in the villages. There's a map change, and then there's an annual report back to the City Council on the TDR activities. So those are kind of the main changes that are proposed. As Councilmember Goodman said, we've been in committee for a while, and the value of that is most of you have actually sat in at one point or another and talked about TDRs and code changes. So we actually started this. There was actually a small amendment done with the Lakeside Development Agreement back in December, which I didn't show on my timeline here. But we basically started putting together the issues paper after the holidays in February. And then we've gone through a number of code revision edits based on the discussions at Council Committee. There was a public hearing held by the Planning Commission in April. And then, as Councilmember Goodman stated, we've had input from King County and Forterra on the code revisions, and then the Talus Master Developer also weighed in towards the end of the process. So here's an example. So I thought, you know, the easiest thing to do is to take you guys through a hypothetical, assuming I can say it, example of how the process would work. So basically, a developer comes to the city and wants to build, in my example, wants to build in the central Issaquah plan core area. And the base entitlement there is 4 stories. But you can basically add 2 additional floors by either using density bonus, which is part of one of the tools in the CIP area, or TDRs. For this example, the developer says, I want to use TDRs. So the added area of the 2 floors would be 48,000 square foot. Obviously, that assumes a 24,000 square foot floor plate. So if you take 48,000 square foot and divide it by 1,200 square feet, which is the number of square feet per ERU, that equals 40 TDRs. So if we sell a TDR for $18,000 each, it basically generates $720,000 for the TDR bank. The developer gets to build his 6-story building, and then the council would prioritize whether we go out and use that $720,000 to purchase park or open space land. We would buy, and I've got it conflicting here, I apologize for that. So we go buy the land for $720,000, and we extinguish the TDRs on that property. So this is in just a really quick flash how this would work. I think with that, that's the end of my presentation. Although when we get to a motion, assuming we might get to one tonight, I have an alternate exhibit that I would like to substitute based on requests from the Talus Master Developer. So with that, any questions?
Councilmember Goodman?
Thank you. So Keith, when you had a list of the changes to the code, yes. So the last one says annual report to Council of TDR activity. I think it says periodic summary.
Say periodic?
Yes. Just so nobody thinks we're trying to pull a fast one. It says periodic summary.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Faulkner?
In the definitions in the code, there's a definition of CIP that I'm not understanding at all. It doesn't seem to, it just says the allowable ERUs and the associated number of peak hour trips and impervious surface that may be transferred from a TDR sending site to a TDR receiving site. I'm not understanding how that is a definition of the Central Issaquah plan.
So
18.10.2020 definitions.
Right, so it says Central Issaquah Plan certified development rights.
It appears we're allowing the peak hour trips and impervious surface to be transferred from a sending site to a receiving site.
So the intent with that, Councilman Faulkner, was to defer to this, because the CIP included standards for impervious and density, the intent was not to list standards in two places, in two different codes. It was to defer it to the CIP, which is what it does in the tables. So I can't recall the genesis of why we have a CIP definition. I don't know that we need it, and if it's causing confusion, maybe it just should be struck from the definition section. Because I would agree with you, it's not necessarily descriptive of...
Even if it does allow or doesn't allow something, it's very ambiguous as to what it really means. I mean, the wording really doesn't... It seems to me what we're doing is allowing something to happen to the CIP that is not in the CIP standards but is in the TDR standards. And I'm not really comfortable with, especially not exactly understanding what the definition means.
So the TDR, because the CIP core area is identified, and I go back to the map, as a receiving site, it should be allowable for a developer to choose between density bonus or TDRs in terms of different tools that they can use to increase their density on their property. Now, because of, and the conversations we've had with developers, because the density bonus program codifies the price per square foot and the TDR program allows it to fluctuate with the market, there's at different times potentially a more beneficial tool to use in the toolbox, depending on what the market is doing. So I don't think it's inconsistent. I think what it's doing is allowing a developer in the CIP area to choose TDRs or density bonus, not to choose both of them, not either or.
As I recall, that was in the standards for the Central Issaquah plan. The bonus density program gave the ability to use TDRs in that.
It's not a TDR. It's a.
I understand. There were specific mention to TDRs in that portion of the code, though. Unless that was stricken. That was one of the things that was talked about, was the ability to still use TDRs in the CIP. So as I recall, the CIP standards, when it was talking about the density bonus, said you could use density bonus and or TDR.
Right. And so
that's why I'm wondering why it's in here. And this is talking about peak hour trips and impervious surface.
So the definition is not trying to change any of the standards that are in the CIP. Again, I would refer you to the tables towards the back of the code, which basically says, in looking at the density and the impervious surface, to defer to the CIP plan or the standards, and not, it won't be recodified in this code. So as I said earlier, I don't know that there is a benefit to this definition. So if the definition is causing an issue, I think probably the cleanest thing to do would be to remove the definition from this code section, because I don't know that it adds value.
Then I would recommend we take it out, unless somebody can show me where it does add value.
That would be the subject of an amendment.
Okay.
After a motion were made.
Okay.
So hang on to that.
Okay.
Fine.
And then the other issue that I have is that in following this process from last fall, one of the biggest issues that I understood is there wasn't 500 TDRs available anyplace. So that was the reason the city's bank had to be able to pre-sell TDRs. I'm really not comfortable pre-selling TDRs from the bank. If you look at King County code, King County says that TDRs will be sold not less than what they were paid for or market value, whichever is in the best interest of the citizens. That makes sense to me. Being able to pre-sell TDRs means we're just arbitrarily setting a price no matter what we want for it. We have I haven't researched this as much as I'd like to, unfortunately, because I just haven't had or taken the time, but I was looking at the Heartland report done last fall, and it says in here on the sending site values, the King County's banked transaction prices for land within Issaquah Creek Basin have ranged from $25,000 to $60,000 per TDU. In your example, you're using $18,000, and in the Lakeside Development Agreement, we're using $15,000. That to me seems to me that, you know, if TDRs are based in King County on an actual sale where they've actually purchased them, it seems to me that we're really undervaluing the TDRs.
So King County's TDR is a different square footage. So the reason why ours is coming up at 18,000, this is actually comparable to what Heartland said. This is $15 a square foot, and this is what King County sells theirs at. So because theirs are 3,500 square feet per TDR, which works out to be the same if they're spending $40,000 per TDR. So, and King County's reviewed this. So even though this number looks different, the metric is different. The fact that we've put ours at 1,200 square feet per ERU is why it comes out. It's a much smaller square footage. So what happens is when you buy a King County TDR and you pay $40,000, you get 3,500 square feet. Well, if I'm building commercial, that's almost 3 times what a city's TDR is. So that's why there's a disparity in the price.
Okay. With that said, is there not the opportunity to incentivize buying TDRs by lowering the price arbitrarily? Because for whatever reason, either you feel the market's not in a good position. I mean, whoever is responsible for the bank could say, you know, we really want this project, so instead of charging $20,000 for a TDR, being able to buy them through King County or even getting them privately, is there a reason why they couldn't be set at $18,000? And the only way the council would know is when they get their periodic report.
So there's checks and balances. One is that the purpose of the program is to acquire parkland or open space land. So the lower that you set the TDRs, although you may facilitate a development project, you're going to generate less revenue to preserve property. And that's the sole purpose. This is really a property preservation tool and not a development incentive tool. And so I guess my first point is, one, I think there's a built-in checks and balance with the purpose of the program. And the second is, you know, that is really the purpose of kind of the interaction with the council on both the expenditure of the revenues and on the reporting, is that it gives the council an opportunity to see how the transactions are happening. And as the conversations occurred at committee, there really aren't a lot of developers, actually there's no developers kind of lined up to do these. I mean, so it's not like when you approve, if you were to approve this code amendment, that we're going to be kind of hit by a wave of developers wanting to take advantage of TDR projects. So the opportunity for us to self-evaluate this, we'll be lucky if we have one a year. So I guess my point, Councilman Faulkner, is that you're going to have a lot of opportunity to weigh in on how the bank is operating the program, and if you believe that it is discounting the cost of TDRs, not only will we be hearing about it from the council, but we'll be hearing about it from our residents and King County, because they will believe that we're stacking the deck to disadvantage their program, and that's not what this is about either.
Okay, but all your checks and balances are after the TDR sold. And again, you know, the designated official is the one that negotiates the TDR price up front. And if that happens to be wrong for whatever reason, the checks and balances are only after the fact saying, oh, we made a mistake, now how are we going to fix it? And I'm also uncomfortable saying that it's going to be to the city's best interest because we're going to buy parkland. It goes back to the same thing. You can incentivize a developer by saying we're going to sell TDRs cheaper and nobody really cares because that money's going to go to buy parkland. It just makes me feel uncomfortable the way we're doing this. Having a bank that we're pre-selling things that we don't own for prices that we don't know what they are, whether they're close to market or not close to market, it just makes me feel very uncomfortable. And I know we can't afford to pre-purchase TDRs because of the cost involved with them. It just makes me feel kind of uncomfortable that we're putting it all on one person's lap to say, you know, pick the price, make the deal, and if it's, you know, $10,000 for a TDR is what's sold and we sell 500 of them, that's a pretty big mistake to go back and try to fix. Not that that would happen, but on the other hand, you know, what's more important, getting more parkland or incentivizing something that we really want developed badly?
Councilmember Goodman?
Thank you. I, at this point, would like to move to adopt ordinance number
2684.
Repealing and replacing sections in Chapter 18.10 relating to the transfer of development rights program, and direct the administration to prepare an agenda bill to consider the expansion of the existing TDR interlocal agreement with King County to include property on Squaw Mountain.
Second.
Okay, moved by Goodman, seconded by Martz. Discussion. Yes.
So I will support this ordinance. We haven't talked about the second part of this yet, the Squaw Mountain issue. And the reason I'm supporting it are the reasons that I said before. I think it is a good idea for us to revise our ordinance to try to create a program that is more robust. And I hear Councilmember Faulkner's concerns about the values. And the way I view this is that this really, the only sort of significant difference that I see between this and our current ordinance is that this is decoupling what has been happening in the past as one transaction. And so you have all of the one sort of transaction happening at once where you're buying TDRs, receiving money, preserving land all at once. And this allows us to decouple that, gives us more options, and actually, in my opinion, creates more transparency, because then we know what those values are. Whereas before, we had just sort of one big single transaction all put together, and you weren't really looking at the cost of the TDRs as much as you were looking at what you were getting to the preservation of that land. And so I think it's a more transparent process myself.
Other comments or questions? Councilmember Scheer?
Thank you, Mayor. You know, in looking at the bill, it seems like this started with the question of, during the Lakeside discussion, you know, what if there were not sufficient TDRs in the market for Lakeside to buy? And that's right in the bill. And I only had the privilege of sitting in on one meeting at Land and Shore on this, so I'm not as fully versed in all of these issues. You know, it seems to me that question is fairly simply answered in the sense that if there weren't 500 TDRs in the market for them to buy, then you wouldn't have a development agreement that would allow them to acquire 500 TDRs. Since it would be development through agreement as opposed to normal zoning, it seems like you would craft the agreement to match the state of reality, and they're either there or they're not there. So I'm not sure how that question actually got us to the current state, and I certainly don't need you, Keith, to recap 7 months of discussions, but I guess I have one very specific question in the proposed code, and then I have a very general question. So I'll start with the specific one because that may be the easiest to answer. At page 20 of 28 of the agenda bill that's on the website, and I'm referencing that because that's what I'm working off of. It's subsection 5 on that page. It's actually page 14 of the attachment. It's entitled Transportation Concurrency. And the language in that paragraph, which has an awful lot of commas, I'm struggling to understand. So I just want to make sure I get this right, because we're going to be talking a lot about concurrency over the next few months. It says the proposal, comma, with TDRs, comma, must meet the city's transportation concurrency requirements, comma, where the TDR portion of the project, another comma, does not contribute to the project's trip generation calculation. So if I read this the way I think I'm reading this, it has to meet concurrency if the portion that was developed via TDR does not contribute to trip generation. Why does that seem intuitively backwards from what I would expect? Can you explain that paragraph, what that means?
I can try. So the proposal with TDRs needs to meet the city's concurrency ordinance, and I think we all assume that's clear. Okay, and then we get into the sub-comma sections, which I did read this afternoon because I knew you would have a question about concurrency. Where the TDR portion of the project does not contribute to the project's trip generation calculation. So I think, and I'm just going to go ahead and be candid on this, I think that doesn't read the way it wants to read. I actually think what we talked about at committee was that the TDRs would need to meet concurrency as part of the project like everything else. So I think what I would suggest, if the council is supportive of that, which I think they would be, is basically just deleting everything after the IMC reference.
And honestly, that seems like a more logical reading given the first part of that provision.
I think what happened is, and the part of this, and I have to apologize, having dealt with this in red line form for 10 months, things got changed and got changed and got changed upon changes. And so I'm going to guess with you what happened is half of that paragraph got changed and the other half somehow didn't. So I'm going to apologize to the council for that. I believe what that should read is that a project with TDRs needs to meet the concurrency ordinance, because I believe that's the conversation. I'll look to Councilmember Goodman. I believe that's the conversation we had at committee, and I think that's what the committee agreed on, is that the TDRs need to meet concurrency as well.
Okay, so and we may come back to that in a moment. Let me ask. Thank you, Keith, and let me just ask a real, very general question, and this will probably show a complete lack of understanding of this issue. But you know, when I look at the map, at least the one attached to the agenda bill, which actually looks a little different than the one up on the screen.
There's a reason for that.
So, but you know, I look at the map, and let's take this map, and you know, I'm glad to see that actually my street is not red anymore, because I can barely receive my own car in my driveway, let alone receive development on my street. But you know, let's look at the Highlands, and you take a street there, like say 24th or 25th, south of Park. I guess I just don't understand why some places are receiving sites. I understand about it being a sending site, and the green is fairly obvious, where you've got things next to the creek, or you've got, you know, sensitive areas, or the various criteria that are in the proposed ordinance. It's less clear to me why so much of the city is red. Some parts make sense. You know, you've got a lot of the central area, you've got, you know, the side where Costco is, a lot of that area. And I know you said this isn't about promoting redevelopment, it's about environmental protection, but it looks an awful lot like promoting development in certain areas when it's color-coded this way. I guess I don't understand, if you took specifically, say, a street like 24th, how that could possibly be a receiving site for TDRs when there is essentially no growth or redevelopment potential in that area?
So, so good question. So this map is, generally speaking, the same map that was adopted with the initial ordinance in 2007. Basically, there's a couple big changes. One, some of the red for the CIP has been added. The priority 1 and 2 have been taken off this map, so there's just one shade of green. And then this particular map shows Talus removed as a sending site. But when this map was adopted, the urban villages were identified as receiving sites. And so, for example, when we preserved Park Point, there was an additional, and the Highlands has actually been the recipient of 2 big TDR projects, one Mitchell Hill out in King County, and then the other was the Park Point enhancement units. And so I think the answer to your question, Josh, is the city basically took all of the Highlands, since it's under a development agreement, and painted it red with an understanding that the built areas are clearly not going to fit any additional TDRs. But the additional density basically went into the town center area, which is being built up right now. So, and, as we look to the Highlands, one of the questions that we might want to deal with somewhere down the road is, well, maybe we want to take some of it and remove it as a TDR receiving site because it really can't take more development, and maybe it's going to be the Microsoft property that's left as red. I don't know the answer. That wasn't part of, I think, what we looked at was kind of scalpeling out some of our areas. We left it kind of holistic, and that's why it shows up as all red. And before this version of the map, the one that's in the agenda bill, Talus shows up as all red. So, yeah.
So based on the commentary and discussion that we've just had, would it be proper to make a motion to amend at this time with respect to the concurrency provision? Or do we need further discussion on that issue?
No, it would be appropriate, given that it's an amendment. Would have precedence.
Very well. I would, if I may, move to amend section, let me find the right section number. It's section 5 of 1810-2050. It's A sub 5, sub A sub 5. Okay, let me start over. I'm moving to amend proposed IMC 18-10-2050 sub A sub 5 to remove the words after IMC 18.15.260.
Second.
Okay. Discussion on that amendment. Councilmember Winterstein.
Good catch. Thanks for the clarification. I support the amendment.
Other discussion on that amendment? Council ready to act on it? All those in favor in acting upon that amendment as just described, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That amendment passed unanimously. I think so. Let's see. There was a earlier request from Councilmember Faulkner about an amendment.
I don't believe I can support the motion. So going through an amendment on my account would probably be not very beneficial.
Always appropriate for council members to suggest amendments if they desire.
Well, in that case, I would move to amend the motion to remove the CIP Central Issaquah Plan Certified Development Rights paragraph from the definitions in section 18.10.2020.
Second.
Okay, that was moved by Faulkner, seconded by Butler. Discussion. Councilmember Goodman.
I just wanted to comment, just like Councilmember Winterstein said, thank you for the careful reading. It doesn't really matter how long we've been reviewing it. Extra sets of eyes are always good, so thank you.
Councilmember Scher.
Thank you. I just have a question then on the motion, which is, does the removal of that language, it's such a lengthy proposed ordinance, does the removal of that language have any substantive impact on the actual proposal that's before the council, or is it merely just a superfluous definition?
So I think what happened was, since we have CIP in the tables, it seemed like we needed a definition for CIP, and I'm not sure where that language came from. So the only question for the council is CIP used enough in the city code right now that it doesn't need to be redefined in this particular section of code? That would be the only question I would have for the council, and I don't know if that's maybe more of a question for Mr. Tanaka. If using the initial CIP in a land use table should warrant then a definition of what CIP is in this particular code section, I guess I would defer to maybe an interpretation by the city attorney.
Well, just a quick review again. I did look at this once or more, but it appears just on a quick review that the only time CIP, which is what the definition is, occurs on page, on my version it's 225 of 234 in the table 1810-2050A4.
Yes.
Down at the end.
And on page 224.
Madam Mayor.
Well, it says Central Issaquah Plan, not
Madam Mayor.
CIP.
Oh.
Because the definition that is the subject of the amendment is CIP, colon.
That's right.
So,
You're right.
So one way to fix this
What-
would be just to...
Joe, what?
Could I withdraw the motion and redo the motion as rewording that definition as CIP, Central Issaquah Plan?
Well,
Period.
I don't think you need to do that because, as I was saying on page 225, where the term CIP is, I could only see that one instance where that is used. It says CIP zones, and then it says refer to Central Issaquah Plan for standards. So
It seems okay.
As Mr. Niven said, it sort of loops back. So I think your amendment is proper and would sort of help clean things up.
Councilmember Scher.
Thank you. There's actually one other place.
Oh, okay.
It's in the table at 1810-2050A2, at least one other place that I found, where it says other zones for residential density, and there it specifically references a development agreement or the CIP, no definition of CIP, could be capital improvement plan, could be Central Issaquah Plan. I
Well,
get confused sometimes.
Yeah, but I think that's a circular reference, so I think we don't really need a definition of CIP, and certainly not the definition that
No.
is here.
I mean, if anything, it should just say CIP Central Issaquah Plan and end it there.
Yeah. So
And I'm happy to amend the motion either way.
I think your amendment would be helpful in my opinion.
Okay, then I would withdraw my previous motion and make a motion that CIP would be defined as Central Issaquah Plan.
All right.
Okay.
Is there a second to that motion?
I accept that. As a friendly amendment.
There are no friendly amendments.
My apologies.
Especially not at 10 o'clock at night.
But in common use, you've indicated your approval and this understood.
Want to vote?
So we have a motion.
Can I ask for one clarification from the chair? Sorry. So was it the intent to substitute this exhibit for the one that was in the council packet? I don't know if I heard that part.
You didn't, because we hadn't
Oh, sorry.
hadn't discussed that yet.
But this is an amendment.
Yes.
Okay.
Right now. And so it's appropriate. It has precedence for the council to act upon the amendment.
Okay.
Everyone understand what the amendment is? Okay. Is the council ready to act upon that amendment? All right, all those in favor of the amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passed unanimously. Now, other amendments, other actions? Yes, Councilmember Goodman.
I would make a motion that, well, wait just a minute. This is the new proposed replacement map.
This was the request of the Talus master developer to remove Talus as a receiving site. So Talus shows up as
neutral,
as non-colored, as you can see from where I'm pointing with the mouse.
Okay. And this was a request by the Talus master developer.
Right, which unfortunately came after the agenda bill was put together, which is why it was not part of your packet. So I apologize for any confusion that this might add.
So this would be an amendment to substitute
this map
for the map that is in the agenda packet.
Yes, and that would be my amendment.
Second.
All right. Discussion on that amendment. Councilmember Scher.
Thank you. Again, as someone who's affected by the color change personally, it seems to make sense. I don't see how Talus could be a receiving site above and beyond the entitlements that have already been authorized by the development agreement for that urban village. Other than what other building is going to occur there in the future that's already planned. But it still sort of brings me back to the question of, if we're reshading portions of the map now, once that becomes codified and this becomes the established map, then you have to go through a certain level of review in order to make those changes. I guess the one thing I'm a little unclear about is it's a level 1 review to create something as a sending site and a level 3 to add a receiving site. What is the mechanism beyond this vote this evening to make something neutral in the future, such as with Talus is being done?
I think I think it's just a code amendment. Because the map is codified, it would just go through as an agenda bill to the appropriate council committee and then back for council action.
I guess just then to follow up, that seems a little odd, only because that's a much higher level of review to make something neutral than it would be to actually add something as even a receiving site, because council action is typically delegated for much higher standards of review.
So there's criteria in the code for the designation of receiving and sending sites. So the council's already taken action on what qualifies as either one of those two. To remove an area, I think it kind of seems almost like policy, which would be appropriate for the council to take action on. Because you're basically saying that what was a receiving site should no longer be, or maybe a portion of it should be, and maybe there should be a public process associated with that.
Councilmember Marks?
So I'm sure Councilmember Scher's property is charming. There's properties above Shangri-La Way that are as yet undeveloped.
Mm-hmm. So what you can't see on this map, because it ends at the city boundaries, is this is the edge of Cougar Mountain Wildland Park up here, and there's actually some parcels that are landlocked up in this part of Cougar Mountain. Yes.
I was actually thinking inside the city's boundary, but above Shangri-La Way. So move
What
to the right,
direction is
little
above
to the right,
you, west?
little. What's that?
West?
No, little to the right. Move to the right. There.
Here?
Yeah. That is a currently, is it not undeveloped but developable property?
In Talus.
I'm sorry?
In Talus.
Yes.
It's part of Talus.
Yes.
Yes.
So are we, by taking Talus out, are we taking potential receiving site opportunity off the table in those locations? I want to challenge the perception that Talus is full, and so taking this out has no impact, because I realize that property is somewhat steep, but nonetheless, it is a formidable sized piece of property.
So there is property up on top. There's basically 2 or 3 development parcels left, depending on who you talk to and depending on grade. The master developer in Talus has over 400 entitlement units left without including TDRs. And so I think the point is you cannot put them all in up at the top of the hill. And I don't think we want them all in at the top of the hill. It would cause, it would actually be a density issue for the development agreement, and that would be a major mod. So to answer your question, we are removing a TDR receiving site from the city, but I think the point is we have enough development rights left over from Talus that there's really no way you could use them all and want more on that property.
That's a fine answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions? Okay, are you ready to act upon this?
Yep.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Councilmember Winterstein.
Sure. So, oops, let me go back the other direction. Sorry. Once it hits 10 o'clock, I don't function very well. So the thing is that one of the reasons why TDRs aren't happening all the time is because a developer who wants to buy additional density is willing to pay a certain amount per square foot. I mean, they've done a pro forma. They've figured out what they would need to spend to make it pencil for them. Buying land anywhere in King County, let alone in the city of Issaquah, is an expensive proposition. Even hard to develop land that's encumbered by a number of critical areas has a fairly high property value, and probably has a very low number of TDRs associated with it based on non-critical area and zoning. So what ends up happening is, so you might go find a 2-acre piece of property that's next to a creek that might be listed by an agent for $500,000, but it may only have 2 development rights on it. Well, if you look at the math there, no developer is going to pay $500,000 for 2 development rights. So basically, if you want to preserve that property because it's got critical area significance or open space significance or potentially park significance, you put an escalator in it to make the numbers work for a developer to actually pay for that $500,000. In other words, you're changing 2 TDRs into more TDRs to generate the revenue to preserve the property. And so, and contrary to I think what we heard earlier, that happens in King County, and that is what we would do and have done in the past. So for example, when Park Point was preserved, and I'll go back to that little table, you know, there were basically about 400 units in Park Point, and those 400 units went to Bellevue College and Bernstead and Ichijo. What that doesn't show is that we also gave Port Blakely 500 enhancement units to basically get the land available to put those projects on. So there was an escalator involved, and I think what Councilmember Goodman said is what we're doing is actually providing more transparency by pulling the process apart. So with Port Blakely, with Park Point, there was an escalator. With the Mitchell Hill TDR, which Port Blakely did, they basically bought the Mitchell Hill connector out in King County, and 500,000 square feet was brought into Issaquah Highlands as basically the TDRs that came in, and that was a much greater number of development rights than what was on the property as a sending site. So what the conversion ratio does, and if I'm not being clear, please just jump in, is it basically makes the market work.
Thank you. And you said conversion rate and escalator. The phrase in here is exchange rate, which suggests things can go either direction. What I heard a definition of was take the number of development rights pre-existing on a sending site and
Yes.
Sorry about that. I got the flash.
Oh,
I wasn't
sorry.
on. So I heard you mention, apologize for not having my mic on. So the exchange rate suggests, and this is a nuance, up and down.
Right.
But it really is, this is a tool for taking the value of a smaller number of development rights from a sending site and creating a greater number of development rights for a receiving site.
Yes, I can't imagine it would go the other direction.
Okay. All right, thank you for that. I do have another question.
Okay.
So there's another portion to this, and I apologize if I was going to get ahead of somebody here. Prior to seeing this version of it, all I'd heard, so the other areas in King County outside of the Issaquah Creek Basin. Could you give us this other area, the other part of the motion, the second part of the motion? Could you give me a little bit of history on this, and because I am somewhat familiar. There was, I think we had some conversation, at least in the meeting I was at, the one time I got to be in Land and Shore and talk about this, about potentially that there is property not currently in the ILA with King County, adjacent to Issaquah, that we may have an interest in helping to preserve, even though it's not in our city, but it could be a benefit to the city.
What I understand is, and I'll defer to the mayor if I get this a little bit loose or wrong, in the May Creek Basin, there is property that was being made available to log, and there was an effort by a number of local folks to try and get that property preserved so that it would not be logged and it would stay in its forested condition. And it is not in the Issaquah Creek Basin, it's in the May Creek Basin. That's what I understand. So the suggestion was to expand the geography of our interlocal agreement with King County to include, I think it was 40 development rights for that property. So right now we have 75 TDRs in our interlocal agreement with King County that we've agreed to take from rural King County. And I think the suggestion was that we potentially add 40 additional units for this other geography that would benefit Issaquah. And I think there's been really no conversation about that other than knowing that that request is out there for us.
Okay, so with this motion, should it pass, then that basically is instruction to open up conversations of updating the ILA with the county and to add the May Creek Basin to the potential sending sites.
I think the suggestion would be that would be a conversation that would start, and whether it would actually result in that kind of a motion, I don't know.
Okay,
I
so
threw a little nuance in there.
So this motion is just
to have an agenda bill to start the conversation.
Yeah, to consider it.
Yes. All right,
Because previously, the council identified the Issaquah Creek Basin as the area from which it would receive county TDRs. And that was a policy, a very conscious policy decision that was made. So this would require another council action.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, so I want to get back to the bank. So what sticks in my mind was I remember last December, I think it was characterized as this ability to for the bank to sell rights that it hasn't yet acquired from a sending site, created a more liquid market for developers, so that their ability to execute on whatever their plan is wasn't encumbered or hidden or encumbered by the lack of availability, lack of available sending TDRs. And so is there precedence in this? Who else? Could you speak to the precedents or not, or where else this may be going on?
Sure. So The first thing I would say is that our TDR code, as it sits, even the clunky process-oriented one, is still, I think, very progressive when you look at our peers in the region. And part of it is just our geography, being on the UGA edge and having a lot of open space and having a community that has expressed a desire to preserve open space has kind of put us at the forefront of TDR codes. So what I would tell you is this, our proposal that's in front of you this evening that would allow us to pre-sell TDR certificates is not paralleled in this state. And so it would be, I think, a model for the rest of the communities to look at and watch and see how it works.
Thank you.
Other questions? Comments? Is the council ready to act upon the two motions as amended? Councilmember Winters.
Yeah, thank you for allowing me to think about it a little bit. The area of the bank, so the precedent setting, selling, before we have them, this is a concern of mine. I'm not a banker, but I suspect that regulations governing banking are many more pages thick than what we have here. And so, this area being unexplored, I think I agree with comments earlier made by Councilmember Faulkner about the director. What's the title I want? The designated official. Really, it's in their hands to negotiate, the rates. And I think with the lack of precedence in this, so it's a concern of mine. It doesn't. It's not going to preclude me from supporting this going forward. But I think because I think overall, they're unbalanced. There are sufficient enough improvements in this to support the overall changes. But just as going forward action and activity, I think that implementation of this, I'm going to hope to see and hope to be part of, further development of more details of controls and reporting and visibility. And I don't know what those are right now, but I think that's just an action I think we are creating for ourselves going forward. Thank you.
Okay, other comments or discussion? Council ready to act upon these motions as amended? All those, I will do them in two sections, since they were read in that manner. The first one is to adopt ordinance 2684, repealing and replacing sections in chapter 18.10 relating to the transfer of development rights as amended. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
That was 6 in favor and 1 in opposition. Councilmember Faulkner. Second item is to direct the administration to prepare an agenda bill to consider the expansion of the existing TDR interlocal agreement with King County to include property on Squawk Mountain. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passed unanimously. Next before the council this evening is good of the order, and this would be an additional opportunity to talk about regional committees or matters or whatever council would wish to speak to at this moment. Any items for good of the order? There is no executive session, and therefore the council meeting is adjourned at 10:17 p.m. We made it. Yeah. 10:15.